People were delighted with the guy who showed amazing strength. They thought it was a historic moment. A guy named Harden, who was made up of muscles, was going to lift a barbell weighing 10 tons so he could turn the history of the World Powerlifting Congress around. It was quite difficult for the guy, and he was trying to lift this barbell with clenched teeth. When he tensed all his muscles and inhaled, he blushed because it was so hard. But Harden was able to lift the barbell with a scream at the age of 17, and is determined to become the strongest creature whose power exceeds human capabilities. Something happened, and the barbell fell from the athlete's hands to the floor with a big bang, and the guy grabbed his heart. Harden looked horrified, and the voices of people could be heard asking if he was okay and calling for a group of medics to come to him and trying to encourage him with their cheers. He saw the sky and realized that he had lost consciousness again. Although he remembered the doctor's words that he needed to be careful, the guy thought that if he had more muscles, this would not have happened. And this epic skill was mastered by an unlimited muscle. But I heard that girls don't like it when you have a lot of muscles. So I also mastered the rare skill of combat compression muscles. He had a difficult choice between style and muscle, and realized that he already needed to take protein while he was developing his unique Hawkeye skill. The boy was lying on the grass among the chickens, who began to peck him with their beaks. As soon as he realized this, he woke up screaming and got up and felt scared. And he wondered if he lifted the barbell with less enthusiasm, because his skill of composure had been activated. He looked ahead and saw endless fields and large chickens looking at him curiously. But I began to think about what had happened, combining all the events, and seemed to understand. Harden assumed that she had too much chicken, and that's why she ended up in hell, which is inhabited by a chicken dinner. That's why the chickens here were very large, and one of them came close to him. They started poking him in the face with their beaks, so he thought they were attacking him. Out of anger, he hit one hen on the head and shouted for them to stop pissing him off. The main reason was that he didn't have the protein he used to eat regularly. When he looked at the trigger, his hawk's eye was activated, and thus he could measure how much protein the object contained. The name and mass of the protein came up for him, and he was interested in the message about the bridge, as well as the sound, which he assumed could be the voice of his ancestors, and he was very happy about it and jumped up over the chickens. Because if it was as he thought, he gladly accepted these gifts. Harden was sitting by a tree, very satisfied with his meal, and there was an extinguished fire with animal bones nearby. But his face became a little more serious, and his joy disappeared, because he was thinking about something. Looking at his hands, he did not know if they had always been so thin. Then he moved on to the chest, which also seemed to shrink. But when he moved to his back, he was surprised that he could scratch it, because the last time he could do it was in kindergarten. He went out and saw the water and could not believe it, and thought that it could not be true, because work can never betray. He looked into the water where the fish were swimming and could not believe that the results of his work could just disappear. When he saw himself in the water, he grabbed his head and screamed, not understanding where all his muscles had gone. Harden was puzzled by this situation and wondered what happened at that moment. But he realized that he didn't care where he ended up anymore, as his many years of work were sometimes more important. He didn't want to be suffocated, and grabbed onto the tree with both hands, his fingers digging into the bark. Everything he did was for the sake of his impressive body, and he used his strength to lift the tree with its roots up. With a little difficulty, he managed to throw the large tree over his shoulders and breathed out a sigh of relief. He tried not to worry and decided to do a few squats with a tree. Harden confidently began his hard training, and believed that his work would never betray him. The sounds of his training were heard around him, and he decided to move on to jump squats as his abilities were improving. 3 months have passed since then, and the athlete was satisfied that he was right about the work. It was all a lie, because I hadn't exercised a single muscle in all that time, and I was disappointed and didn't even understand what life was. Harden looked back to where the chickens were walking and was satisfied that he had enough protein. The hen watched in amazement as the boy enthusiastically wanted to start over, but with all the feelings of a duck. When Harden looked back, he was very frightened and did not understand what he was seeing. There was a giant chicken several times bigger than the ones he ate, and it looked crazy. He began to run away, and I wondered why he was doing all this. The guy just wanted to get big muscles and kept running away from the giant chicken. Harden was very frightened, and did not think that his desire was so great that it required such trials. But he realized that the chicken was fast and strong and that one strike could lead to death on the spot and was too threatening. But the boy admired his beautiful pectoral muscles so much that he couldn't even take his eyes off them. I assumed that wings help a smoker develop his chest, so I thought it would be best to create a machine where he could do crossover training. He was angry with himself because he thought that his muscles were not growing because he had little strength. So he concentrated on strength when he should have been working on his abs. The guy who was running away and didn't want to die, his wish was that he wanted to have the same wide and strong sternum. More big chickens showed up to meet him, and he was angry because they were clingy. Harden ran right at them and shouted that he didn't need this, because looking at them activated his hawk's eye and showed how much protein they contained. The giant chicken was already very angry. Its eyes were red, and it tried to grab the athlete while he was apologizing to them. He was shown that the creature that was chasing him was a cocatrix and consisted of pure protein weighing 12,000 kilograms. But he was surprised to learn that he would gain a rare new skill of unrivaled muscle recovery after eating a lump of cocatrix. He was very interested in this, and ran past its paws and turned around to face it. Harden looked at him and realized that everyone usually thinks that muscles appear during training. But in fact, it was not true. Because during training, muscles are destroyed, and in this state, muscle function is temporarily weakened and therefore strength decreases. But as they get the necessary nutrients and rest, they eventually get bigger and climb up the tree. And how? To put it simply, they get bigger not during training, but during rest. So as muscle recovery is faster, so is muscle growth. He broke through the bark with his fingers and was sure that the sooner he built up his muscles, the sooner he would stop being a choker. He jumped to the top to hit the course and was ready to bet his life on it. He always wanted to have sculpted muscles, so he repeated the exercises 1,000 or even 1,000,000 times. He was shown a warning about exceeding the capacity of the combat compression muscles and asked whether to stop this skill. Harden stopped this process and got a unique skeleton-changing skill. With one of his giant hands, he wanted to strike the course, which was making a lot of noise. His fist was a little bigger than his head and fit inside his entire beak. He was happy that he had succeeded. But again, he received a warning that the internal structure of the muscles had been worn out. Harden went upstairs and looked calm, not caring whether the skill reactivated or not. That day, he ate a chicken breast with pleasure and lay on the lawn, happy to have received unsurpassed muscle recovery. The guy was grilling meat on the fire, and he didn't know what kind of place it was or what was going on here. He didn't understand why his muscles had disappeared, and thought that his bodybuilding knowledge was wrong, and that someone was watching him from the bushes. Harden didn't know what was living there, and what kind of situation it was in at the time. 3 guys who were very thin and unnaturally looking were upset, because they hadn't eaten meat for a long time. The skeleton was shocked that cocatrix had defeated that monster in the human account, so I wanted to approach him and ask him about it. But his friends stopped me because they thought he was a dangerous monster. Then they went out to the lawn and with their eyes began to ask him for food. But the athlete did not understand this, but asked who they were. One brave man began to say that in this town called Alimine, they were ghoulies. And although his hawk's eye made the determination, he did not consider people to be meat. As he ate the meat, he realized that he had never heard of such a people before. Ghoulies explained that they were looking for the person who had defeated cocatrix and carefully asked him if he knew who it was. He was surprised that the chicken seemed to have owners, but said that he had killed it. The gulls were very happy to find the creature that killed the chicken, and one of them explained that the mine's worst monster was dead, and now a fight for territory had begun between different species. Harden looked at Ghoulies himself and noticed that he had very thin legs and that they could break with a single blow. But Ghoulies explained that although cocatrix was not very bright, he knew his territory very well. They folded their arms and turned to him for help because he had defeated that monster. Harden pretended not to hear and asked them to repeat how they were asking for his help. The creature was puzzled, for they had repeated the same thing 9 times already. The guy started laughing and said that you always have to repeat everything 10 times, which surprised Ghoulies. He became angry and began to aggressively say that when you do something, you have to repeat it 10 times and called him a snot. One of them got up and told his comrades that they should leave, because it looked like the guy was not going to help them. And Harden explained that he needed to train his muscles, so he would not have time to help them. And they understood this perfectly well, so they did not want to waste their time on it. The creature said that everything was fine, and that they understood that everyone had their own circumstances, but they were very upset about it. But the guy decided to stop them and asked them to take a chicken breast with them since he wouldn't eat it all by himself. They started thinking about taking it because they hadn't eaten fresh meat for a long time. He apologized, and they thanked him for the gift. There was a large piece of chest in front of them, and one of them was thinking about how to take it properly. Charter was very much surprised by this, because he thinks everything is right. He thought that the creature would break its back while lifting the lump and decided to stop it quickly. Ghoul looked at him with incomprehension and asked what had happened. He started shouting at him for asking if he knew how dangerous it was to lift weights from the wrong position. Because they don't call a dead point for nothing. I shouted and asked him if he realized that he had just almost said goodbye to his back for all eternity. Ghoul was frightened by the way they shouted at him and did not know if he really did so badly. Then the guy asked if they really didn't know how to lift heavy things properly. None of them had any idea what they were talking about, as it was the first time they had heard of such a thing. Harden grabbed his head, because in his opinion, that's why they were suffocating. While they were thinking about how to lift such a large piece of meat together, he remembered what he had been told in elementary school. They emphasized to him that he could only really learn when he was giving someone else knowledge, and told him not to talk during training. The teacher told him that if his success in sports stopped, he should try to teach others, and that would help him. And Harden thought about trying to teach someone. At that time, the three ghoulies had already picked up a piece of lump and were carrying it with difficulty to the forest. The guy picked up the piece with one hand and offered to eat together and go to their settlement. At first they didn't believe him, so he asked if they could go tomorrow because his muscles needed to rest, and they gladly agreed. They came to the settlement of Ghoulie and were met by the eldest man, who was sitting on a throne, and his servants were waving leaves. He introduced himself as Lord Gullov and the one who runs them all, and asked if there were any difficulties on the way to them. He wondered if the Lord was considered a Lord of the Indians, but he did not decide to ask directly and answered his question. He was glad that everything was fine, and Harden appreciated him most of all for his long legs and big belly like a frog. But I realized that he didn't do enough sports in his life, and he probably likes beer and food, something fatty, as he was happy with the guy's gift. The Lord said he had ordered his men to bring the rest of the meat, but Harden realized it would take them a long time, and he started laughing out loud because he thought it was a joke, and asked if he was worried about his subordinates. But the athlete didn't like something about him, and asked him to get to the point. And he started by saying that they were in big trouble after his victory over cocatrix. He said that the ghoulies are the weakest people in the Ali mine. They have no hand-to-hand combat skills, so they eat corpses to survive. Since Harden had heard something similar, he decided to stop him and ask him about it. The Lord was surprised that the guy didn't know what a skill was and thought he was joking. The guy looked at him in disbelief and said that he was not joking about it. His face became like a madman and ordered to bring those who brought the boy here. When they were brought in, their hands were tied and the guards were ordered to kneel before the Lord. They were very surprised and did not even know that they had been summoned, so they asked the chief. He looked at them and said that sometimes criminals do not realize their guilt. When the boss came up, he ordered me to bring him something. It was a large wooden bat, and he took it and said that swearing unquestioning allegiance to a stronger monster was at the heart of their discipline. He wanted to punish them for lying when they said that they would bring the one who had defeated cocatrix and make him their subordinate. He swung a large bat, threatening them that they would pay for deceiving him with their lives. His skill was to double the burden, and he activated it. There was a lot of smoke, but the smaller ghoulies, though frightened, were not injured, and someone asked what they were doing. Harden stopped him and said that they distracted him from his training, and suggested that it was normal in their settlement to dine on the weak. Lord was shocked at how he stopped his attack, and the athlete was waiting for an answer to his question. He began to think that it hadn't activated his skill or assumed that he had weakened the bat when he put it down. He was almost sure that his strength and skill had weakened, because then such a choker would not have been able to repel his attack. And in this case, I decided to give him a special honor by showing my skills, as he is very lucky. He shouted that with the help of weights, you can increase the weight of any object from 2 to 10 times. The weight gain was a bit confusing for him. He didn't fully understand it. Lord said that he had enough mana to quadruple his weight and considered it a real cheat. He said that the base weight of the bat was 32 kilograms, and asked what it would be like to quadruple it and add the power of the attack with speed. But Harden covered his head with his hand, and the Lord's bat broke to pieces, and the smaller ghoulies were greatly surprised. He said that what he calls a skill was really cool because he didn't want to become enemies, and the Lord himself was very surprised by this. The guy calmly said that at the moment he was surprised by his character. He raised one hand and held it out to the Lord, taking him by the neck. He seriously questioned whether he was really that strong to dispose of other people's lives. His eyes lit up and asked how much he pressed in one set of squats, presses, and deadlifts. The Lord thought I meant that I wanted to exchange 3 blows with each other. But the guy explained that these are the 3 basic exercises: press, squat, and bench press, because they are the most important. And that's why they usually ask what weight to use for these exercises. But he looked around him and realized that none of them knew about it. He was a little embarrassed because that's how the tattoo started, where rivals have to measure their strength. The Lord asked me with incomprehension if he meant to say that I should just lift this thing called a barbell. And he reminded him that he had promised to become his subject as a loser. Though Harden was surprised, he also reminded him to remember to push his muscles to avoid breaking his back. He began to laugh at the fact that he did not know that his burden worked in the other direction. The main man easily lifted the bar and announced that the Lord had lifted 200 kilograms. The guy said that it was not a bad result, but recommended to strain his glutes more next time, and now it was his turn. Then he turned to the others and told them to watch carefully too, because if he won, he would make them do the same. Harden began to warm up, and the deadlift was a full-body exercise that deprived a person of the greatest strength he could muster. I usually think that athletes lift the barbell with the help of their back muscles, but in fact they are actively working their lower body. Since there is always a risk of injury, you need to relax your hip joints and watch carefully for the correct technique. If you don't see what's starting, the first step is to put your feet shoulder-width apart and straighten up. Next, you need to straighten your back and strain your lower back and buttocks, taking the correct position. And in the end, you need to start lifting the bar along the horizon line to give an impulse from the foot through the calf and bird's eye throughout the body. And when he wanted to prove the barbell when it was at knee height, the Lord decided to increase the weight and see if he could lift it. Although it was difficult, he was able to get up and release the barbell, and it flew tens of meters off the ground. Everyone was shocked, but Harden stood calmly and realized that he had slightly miscalculated the force. He felt a little bad about it and said they would have to make them a new bar. They all bowed down before him and asked him to accept them, calling him the new Lord, and the bar behind him fell very loudly, producing a lot of smoke. The guy was very surprised. He didn't even know what to say. Such behavior of ghoulies was unexpected for him. When Lord Ghoulie lost to Harden, he began to obey him without question. And through communication with him, he learned a lot of surprising things, as it turned out that the world he found himself in was not the same as the one he had lived in before. But still, there was a legend that creatures who got here one day could return to their home world, and he wondered what would happen to this body, that it would be considered a strangler. So he postponed his return. In that city called Laisha, there was a law of the jungle, and for that reason Lord Ghouliv swore allegiance to it. Harden suggested that he call himself the Old Lord to avoid confusion, and he agreed. They arrived at the place where the warriors were being trained, and the Old Lord presented it to him. The guy was not surprised, because he was in good physical shape and expected something like this. The training ground was empty, with only a few bats lying around, so he didn't expect this. Harden asked what kind of training they were doing, but the creature could not explain it to him because he did not have such knowledge. The guy knew that a first-class trainer could build simulators and train his students himself. He became stricter and ordered all the ghoulies to line up in 5 rows. They were not very active and did not understand what was wanted of them, so they slowly stood before him. He addressed them with the fact that he had heard that his friends were considered the weakest creatures here, and had to live on scraps left by other monsters. And after this speech, he asked the residents of the settlement what they needed. They were surprised when the Lord started listing different factors like unification, information about enemies, or speed, but said they needed strong bodies, and he promised to turn them into fighters in 3 months through training. The residents were surprised and could not believe that 3 months would be enough for them. But then their mood changed and they liked it, because then no one would look down on them. He saw that everyone agreed to this and it was great, which made him happy, and he ordered everyone to take a prone position. But none of them understood what he said, and looked at him with a worried look. He took a stand himself, showing everything by example, and started shouting at them to do the same. When I looked at them, I saw that everyone was doing something wrong and asked what it was. Harden began their workout with a warm-up in the form of push-ups. Later, everyone stood up straight and began to do 100 push-ups. After 3 hours, the ghoulie felt how hard it was. They were tired and thirsty. Some of them started screaming from fatigue. Others could not even get up because they had no strength. The guy had already done 20,067, and even though it was harder, he didn't stop. When he had done it 3 more times, someone came up to him and addressed him. The boy was doing weighted push-ups, and the Old Lord told him that there was no one left who could do it. He seemed happy and said that he would do it 100 more times, and then he could go. They were shocked, because they had already been made to do 700 push-ups, and he still wanted to do more. The ghoulie were shocked and did not even have the strength to do it once, because they thought they would die from it, and thought that it was better when they had an Old Lord. They were told enough was enough, because they had already done so much, and slowly everyone began to rise. The boy was amazed to hear them outraged, because their whole body hurt and they thought they would need to sleep for a week to recover. And most of all, he was amazed when they started speaking for the Old Lord. Harden threw off his stone and agreed to this, and ordered everyone to stand up, and they looked at him anxiously. Some of them were even glad that it was over, but their bodies were already very tired and thought that it was time to eat. The guy started shouting at them angrily, saying that because of this attitude they were considered the weakest. When he calmed down a bit, he turned to them and asked if they were ready to endure all the humiliation, because they themselves said that here it was like in the jungle, and there the weak are the first to die, and this alarmed them. He shouted and asked if they were going to stay weak until someone killed their family and friends, and he said that they could leave, because he was the one who refused them. Clenching his fist, he said that he would give those who stayed his muscles to protect what was most precious to them, and asked them to trust him. He mentioned all the bodybuilders who had good coaches, and asked what he knew about being a good coach. Either be someone who has knowledge about muscles, or someone who can push their body to the limit. And for some people, this is possible because they can turn their knowledge into an unrivaled result. But I couldn't say that they were the best coaches, because the best coach is the one who gives 0 students the motivation to continue playing sports. He asked them to believe him until death, and they are doing their best to become the best version of themselves. He motivated them to protect their family, which has a father in right hand and a mother in left. And he asked them to reap for the sake of their parents, their revival, and for the sake of their new self. No matter how hard it was, Ghoulie would do push-ups and even scream after completing a push-up. After that, their will was stronger, and no one complained because Harden's words were right on target. And it was at this moment, regardless of the boy's will, that his coaching skills reached a new level. 3 months had passed, and some creatures were walking along the path leading to the ghoulies settlement, and they were sure of it because they had heard it from the scouts. They saw this, and one of them asked if they would use combat abilities on them. But the other one did not understand why we should spend our combat abilities on them, why we should just attack them. He shouted that the first colony of human lizards would be built in that place. The old and new lord saw the group approaching them, and the boy noticed that they had well-developed thigh muscles, and Harden started shouting at them to tense their chests as if they were going to do abdominal exercises. And Ghoul looked very good. They could see his muscles and told them to take a deep breath and tighten their stomachs. And the next order was for them to keep an eye on the facilities. Stones began to fall on the lizards from above, killing some of them on the spot. They did not understand what was happening and who had done it. Harden looked down at the bottom of the pile, a little surprised by this question, and explained that it was done by a people called the ghoulies. But now they were not the weakest people, as they had been considered before. The lizard man was very angry, because in this way they could exterminate them all. But I thought about grabbing their main man and assumed that then the development of events would be different. There was a powerful mana coming from the old lord, and he thought it was their commander. But he realized that it was just Ghoul and he could not lose to them. He tore his clothes and began to shout that the lord should not hide behind his subjects and ordered them to come forward. The guy thought about the offer of the main lizard man to fight one-on-one, and the old lord asked how he would react to the enemy's provocation. He thought about it and remembered that he had an iguana as a child, a rare species of sea crocodile, and was drooling, so eager to play with it. The sea dragon's teeth-clenching force was more than 2 tons, but even such force could not break through his trained muscles. And he mentioned what to do with those animals who do not want to obey. But he remembered immediately when his animal tried to bite his hand. He held up his hands to their leader, who asked if they would admit defeat. He took the lizard in his arms and said that first he had to put it on its back. He started bleeding from the mouth, and the next step was to look into his eyes. The boy came close to his muzzle and opened his eyes wide. The lizard man started screaming and begging him to let him go. But the boy remembered that he had to let the animal know who was stronger. Looking directly into his eyes, he repeated the same words that he was stronger than him. At that time, the lizard begged to be released and not to disgrace the warrior in such a way. But the guy didn't listen to him and continued his manipulations until he gave up. Harden was happy that he was right and that the book was telling the truth. Everyone was very happy that they had won, and the lizard man was already politely asking to be let go. Not far from Ali's mine in the county of Werdo, there was a man who was happy to have such talent and pointed his sword at the boys. He gave them a second-level order to find out the circumstances of cocatrix' disappearance and recommended that they not waste time. The soldiers shouted in a chorus that they were ready to obey his lordship's order. Count Leo watched them leave his hall. Then the count asked the commander if he had really decided to entrust such an important matter to these yellow mouths. But I just laughed about it and asked him not to worry about it. He understood that they looked very young, but he assured them that they could be trusted and called geniuses. Ryan was widely known for his skills as a swordsman who destroyed more than one opponent, and as far as comparing techniques and attacks, she was better than him. And Hugo, who was in the group with him, uses a big sword, and it's practically blunt, but it has a very strong force that cuts through both the enemy and his weapon. How, if they attack together, even against a dragon, they are no match, and these words really inspired confidence in the count. And Leo decided to ask the simple-minded warrior standing next to him if he was different in any way. The commander said that the guy was not very good at fencing, although he tried hard. This surprised him, because he didn't understand why he would send him. And John explained that they had been friends since childhood, and these two geniuses are very attached to the guy and laughed about it. Sam was carrying a large bag with his friend's belongings in it, and they were watching the road. A goblin was sitting in a tree and prepared an arrow to attack the soldiers. Ryan went somewhere and found himself behind the creature, putting his sword to its back. They were surprised to see the arrow fly, but the creature's side was already spurting blood. The arrow flew past Sam's face, and he only had time to squint a little, but sweat was already dripping down his face. They were told to be careful. There were also hobgoblins hiding among the goblins, and looking around, there were many of them. But Hugo was not afraid of this. He took his sword and began to slash at the enemy. They put Sam's safety first and shouted that they would not let even a hair fall from his head. Even though it was hard for them, they told him that they were ready to defend him, no matter what it cost them. He shielded himself from the enemy and thanked his brothers with all his might. When the fight was over, Ryan and Hugo approached the boy and asked him if he was in trouble and apologized for letting one goblin go in his direction. The guy started shouting at his friend and asked if he was joking because Samuel could be in danger. The guy closed his eyes and apologized, saying that there was no excuse for his behavior. While his friends were arguing, he wondered why he was so weak, even though they were training together, and thought it would be better if he was wounded. He didn't know how to become stronger as a swordsman. The guy looked in a good mood and laughed at what someone else could not do. Ghoul supported the coach's words and said that nothing could be done about it. Harden took the lizard and told him to start doing push-ups with support, but he didn't understand what kind of exercise it was. After some time, the lizard men thanked them for their time, and the guy invited them to come back whenever they wanted, but it was doubtful. The ghoulies showed all their muscles and bragged to him and wished them a safe journey. Their leader was not very happy about this humiliation and ordered his people to leave. He was also surprised when he saw the goodie builders for the first time. When you start playing sports, your muscles get injured, and progress comes in the process of nourishing them. You also need to unload them. But as fatigue accumulates in the central nervous system, it reduces athletic effort and leads to injuries. So to avoid this, you need to give your body a rest. After 9 weeks of training, he noticed that his progress had slowed down. It was noticeable because yesterday they had done 3,504 push-ups, and that day only 3,503, and then he decided that they needed to be relieved. And when he wanted to give them 1 day's rest, the next day something amazing happened. One of the ghouls approached him. A creature in a cheerful mood was heading toward him and wished him a good morning. Then he saw that they seemed to have grown taller and stronger, and they wanted to know what sport they would do today. And having evaluated them with my hawk's eye, I noticed that they had evolved to goodie builders, and the mass fraction of fat was 8%. That's when he realized that they wouldn't need unloading as much as they used to. Harden said that the lizard men were gone and that it was now safe to cook, and the old lord agreed with him. But his students asked if they could go hunting alone today. He looked at them closely and asked if they had decided to skip practice today and run away. But one of them explained that this was not the case, because they had never defeated the coca. He told me that all this time they had only been moving the ones he brought them, and since they had already developed pectoral muscles, they might be able to defeat them on their own. This made the boy happy, and he thought that now they would probably be able to increase their training time. The old lord wondered if they could defeat the goodie builders. But when the coach asked him if they were going to win, Lord got very excited and told him not to pay attention. In fact, he thought about what if they combined all their forces or were able to defeat their current lord. But he began to worry a lot and said that it was just a warning. Harlem put his hand on his shoulder, which embarrassed the lord, and he said that he had thought of something else and told him not to worry. Everyone was confused when the coach told them that a trained athlete would never lose to a beginner. After that, they packed all their things and decided to go on a short hike to hunt for food. A lot of time passed, and one of them asked the coach if they had to keep going because they were tired. But at the time, Harden thought everything was very good, because their lunges were good, and because at the moment of relaxation, the back bends and the position becomes unstable. Ghoul twisted his leg and fell, and since the joints are not well developed, it is easy to get injured like the bodybuilder did. This impressed him, because if there was someone else with joints as strong as the coach's, they would have more motivation. They helped someone who was injured to get up, and at that time the teacher asked him not to exaggerate. Sam was practicing with his sword and realized that Ryan and Hugo were apologizing for letting one goblin in, but he blamed himself for his weakness, and realized that he could not be trusted because of it. Because if he had been as strong as his friends, they would not have worried, and nothing like this would have happened. He promised to try harder and train even during his rest time to become stronger. Ryan came up behind him and told him to put more strength into his thumb and imagine that he was cutting through the air. The guy started to worry and asked if his friend woke up because of him, but he just smiled at him and said that it was nothing of the sort. He knew about his nightly training and only pretended to do it because everything he did was for his sake and to make sure everything was okay. But he asked him to think that it was all feedback, so that he could only increase his progress. The guy looked at him kindly and asked if he had just blushed. He was a little embarrassed and said that it was because he was practicing, and Ryan laughed. When Hugo saw this, he asked what they were doing without him. Sam was a little scared and said that it was nothing, as he had just been practicing before, but someone's finger approached his mouth and asked him to be quiet. Ryan was angry with his friend and didn't understand how he dared to show up after he had put the boy in danger. Hugo looked at them menacingly and said that if they didn't go to bed now, Their bodies would be cotton wool tomorrow. He added that he should sleep when the body's recovery is greatest, because then Sam's skin will become even smoother. Ryan agreed with him because he had missed it, and his friend asked him to be more attentive. Then he asked the boy to go to bed and finish his training, but he didn't understand why they were arguing over his sleeping time. He explained that it was all because they were friends, but he still didn't understand why they were arguing about it. Sam realized that there was no point in arguing with them about it, as they were only joking, and I agreed that it was late and I should go to bed as they said. But when he saw a group of lizard men attacking them, he shouted to get everyone ready for battle, and Ryan and Hugo rushed to the attack with confidence, drawing their swords. The chief asked his men to keep running because someone was chasing them. They were running away in panic, and behind them was a large group of crazed chickens. And the goodie builders were running after them with their trainer, because it was their protein, and they had their hands ready to catch them. And how, honestly, Harden did not even know that he had begun to create a new world order. He was very surprised and turned to his students asking if they could really do it, because he assumed that the muscles of the caucus were much cooler than theirs. They were a little embarrassed and said that they would just find it without any force, which made him a little angry, and asked where he had picked up such expressions. The chicken ran after the worm but got stuck between two trees because of its size. But at one point, she screamed and the trees were shattered, and she was able to catch the worm. Everyone was surprised by what they saw and thought a bit about the triggers, but one ghoul got up and came to the tree, and wanted to try to break them too. But he didn't succeed the first time, and said he would take a break and try again. The coach recommended that I move one leg back because there was no bench. He leaned against the tree with both hands and stood in front of it, concentrating on his actions. Ghoul tried to use all his strength to break it and shouted loudly, but they continued to stand, and Harden asked him to come out to them. He thought that the bench press develops all the joints, and that its effectiveness is very high. And I started thinking about what he missed as they put on muscle with various push-ups. The chickens lined up in a row and came up to each other, their eyes glowing. Looking at this, Harden seemed to understand what was going on, because they had a constant progress that the guy had not seen before. And they asked him what happened. He blamed himself for the fact that they were not able to do even what he was doing, and the question immediately came up as to which part of them should be stressed. But the problem was not that the position was wrong, or some part of the body was not strained. They were surprised when the trainer explained that their muscles were accustomed to his workouts. The ghoulie did not believe that this was possible, and wondered what to do about it, and they were told that they had to change their training. Harden was cheerful and told them to line up in 5 rows. He told us that he has a crossover trainer behind him, which he created to add variety to his training routine. He said that from that moment on, they would do exercises for the internal muscles of the chest, and when they mastered it, they would easily be able to match the chickens. The ghoulie were very happy about this, and satisfied that their lord always knew the right answer. They were beating their chests and saying that Harden was the best. He liked that, and asked them to be a little quieter so he could explain. The crossover trainer is an exercise that aims to engage the internal muscles of the chest and give them definition. And the result will only come if they do it in the right position, because it is so difficult to take the first steps, and the coach gradually showed them the technique. First, I had to bend my upper body slightly and bend my knees. Secondly, do not fully extend your arms and fix them so that there is no unnecessary movement during the exercise. And for the third time after that, when the arms are in the center of the simulator, you need to gradually stretch your chest and gather your arms as if a bird is flapping its wings. The fourth, depending on the position of the rope and the angle of inclination, will explain how the sphere of influence could be changed slightly, but counterweights cannot be used, so it is important to fix it. Harden was happy to finally be done explaining, and said they could ask any questions they didn't understand. And since he did a few simulators and asked them to try new exercises, it wasn't their turn. They were very active and ran ahead of each other to try new exercises on themselves. He laughed at their behavior and said that newcomers always look very cute. The chickens looked very shocked at us, and someone on the sidelines said that they were following Harden's instructions closely. They were very happy because they felt their breasts filled with strength. In shock, the chickens began to glow and scream loudly when she saw their muscular bodies. The guy was surprised to see the chicken because its chest had become even wider than before. But his students were not frightened by this at all. They told him not to worry, because they could handle them on their own. And they began to run at each other in an attack with great speed. The chicken managed to hit one goal and he flew away, and blood began to spurt from his mouth. The trainer watched the battlefield and realized that the chest of the cock was filled with greatness and allowed him to evolve. As if they wanted to stop the evolution of cats, they had to design for pectoral muscles filled with strength. That day, the weather was beautiful. Old Lord went out on the street. Seemed that guarding empty days is a boring job, but in fact, it was not. He was very happy about this, because then he felt that he was free to afford to dance and enjoy himself. He thought about the fact that Harden is good at everything, but they don't agree on nutrition at all, and he decided to make coca skin in batter. To do this, he needed freshly peeled coca skin breading flour powder from dried aromatic fruits, salt, and oil. First, we had to cut the coca skin into strips. But if you breaded it right away, it would have an unpleasant odor, so first you had to crush it with salt and spices. After that, he began to mix the breading flour with spices, because that was the only way to make the magic powder, and immediately sprinkle coca on their skin, for perhaps such magic could defeat even Mr. Harden, the old lord suggested. As soon as the skin is placed in a frying pan with heated oil, the chicken friends begin to fry. And when it's rosy, we can say that the coca skin in the batter is ready. At that time, a heavy battle was going on in the forest between the gulls and the cocas. One of them thought that he had been pumping all the pecks like their coach had taught them. But for some reason, they still couldn't beat them. And I started to think about it, and they suggested that maybe the position was wrong. But the other one said that he must be looking at the wrong place. He didn't like it very much and said that was not the point. He was very frustrated and started to panic, thinking that he had some kind of problem with the base. Then Harden came up to him and asked if he didn't understand what was wrong. He explained that the main difference between them and chickens is the concentration of time and effort, because they have only just started to move, but they already want to beat the chickens who have been moving all their lives. This upset the student, but then he realized what was going on. Looking at one of the chickens, he realized that such a beautiful breast was not so easy to obtain. And then the coach said that there was a way to beat them, because there always is. And the student was very surprised and asked if they could really defeat them. Harden asked them to recall how they got to their current form. He thought about it, and said that they all came together as one family. The coach explained that they got into a rhythm together and each took a step to his count. When their faces were dripping with sweat, the coach, who was not tired at all, asked if they were having a hard time, but none of them admitted to it. Even they were a little scared of it, but they didn't give up. It made the coach laugh, because now they were stubborn, but it didn't mean they didn't need to train consistently. Because the fact that they have become a little stronger does not make them weaker. He told me that on the land where he used to live, squats with a weight of 500 kilograms were his base. By showing them by his own example, he would like them to see that they need to train from the very roots. Only then will their strength rise higher, and they will have to overcome difficulties. The disciple began to rise slowly and said that the source of power comes from the roots. Harden was glad that Ghoul was beginning to understand him, and what he had been trying to tell them all along. Then he suggested that they could be helped by pumping their lower body, since they would not be able to win with pectoral muscles alone. His student quickly went into battle, blowing up a lot of smoke. The guy was very happy that they had followed all his instructions so far. He asked them to show him all their efforts and passions, but he failed again and flew up without understanding why. He was a little shocked, even though he realized that by the time they got to this point, the entire lower half had gone slack. But the realization came too close, and many students fell to the ground, making a great noise. And the cocas continued to be on the lawn and shouting, making some sounds. Then the guy stood in front of one of the chickens and looked at it calmly, though with a stern look. Then they all stopped looking at him and gathered in a bunch and began to run in his direction. It scared him a little bit, and he was surprised, but he thought about the one-armed press. And the whole tape of their events turned into a revision of their lives, how they were born and grew up. And then at one point they had a battle with a guy and his students. And as the chicken was cooking on the fire, the coach asked them to keep their heads up, because it was important that they were making progress. He said that they would survey the protein today, and tomorrow they would be able to catch it themselves. Picking up a piece of meat, he told them to all take hold of their muscles and lift up their pieces of chicken. He added that now everyone who has had chicken legs in their hands is doing 300 push-ups. When the students approached the mentor, he asked them if they realized that they were still far from him. Then I did not tell them to teach today what they had already learned and to try to start hunting with caution. Because if they get hurt, they will not be able to train. His students understood and asked if he would go with them. Taking up the rope, he replied that he would first practice himself, and then he would be able to join them. He believed that daily training was much more important than any battle, and they wished him strong muscles and agreed with his opinion. When he started training, he felt sorry that his weight was so low. Looking at the mountains, he thought that he should probably have taken the old lord with him. The ghoulies were talking to each other, and one of them said that they would be able to defeat the cats in this form today. But another warned that what if they evolve, that yesterday you will become dangerous again. But they didn't understand him, because just practicing and coming back was not good enough. He explained that none of them had told them clear criteria for victory beforehand. Because even though the cocos is strong, if he is alone, we can count that yesterday, Harden caught a total of 27 cocos and cocos. After his calculations, he said that while their coach was distracted, it would be enough for them to split up and catch 50 cocos, and that would be considered a psychological victory. And then they decided to divide into 3 teams. As if they were in danger, they would signal each other with their pectoral muscles. But they started preparing for the attack, because they seemed to have figured out everything. Then they started running quickly in the direction of the cats, and shouted at them to have fun and make a riot of the newcomers. When the friends approached some remains, they were shocked by how large the skeleton was, and assumed that it was cocatrix. Hugo noticed that the head was lying separately, as if it had been ripped off with a single blow using strong magic. Sam assumed that the only one who could rip the monster's head off was the royal high wizard Aaron, but he wasn't sure they could handle it. Ryan tried to calm him down, explaining that they would definitely not give him lunch, but he asked that you charge yourself to the best of your ability on your duties. They noticed that something was approaching them again, and advised the boy to hide behind them, and then they realized that they were in for a difficult job. Coca started running out of the bushes and screaming loudly, as if they were scared. The guy said that it was not a problem for him because they were just chickens. But I noticed that some doped-up guys were running after them and catching them. One of them was very surprised when he noticed people, because he did not expect to see them in this forest. Rayan asked his friend to stand next to Sam, because it was the first time he had seen such monsters. He said that he was already standing, but the guy broke away and told them to move away, because it was not necessary. Ghoul stopped his friends and said that people are cruel and enjoy killing, so you never know how they will behave. Everyone was on their guard because it was a dangerous time to make rash decisions. His comrades did not understand what was happening, and the young man explained that they were probably putting on a show to increase their danger. One suggested calling a second and third team as this would reduce the danger, but the question arose whether the high rate of muscle growth was a blessing or a curse, and they began to call goody builders, directing the light at their friends, which crossed the boundary of one species and also increased the pectoral muscles of the coxie. As their muscles began to grow in this glow, they grew. Samuel asked if it was a coconut because he knew that their fighting skills were on par with the wyverns. The cocks were very angry and screaming and heading towards the hulks. They thought they had made the wrong choice, and that it must have been their failure. The guys were surprised to see the leaders of the second and third teams jumping in front of them. The leaders were in a good mood and asked if they were late. They were all serious and ready for a new battle with the enemy. The ghoulie trained hard and recalled how hard the lying down smoke was. Each time they were corrected by their mentor and asked to watch their technique. He reminded me that if you can't do the exercise in the right technique, it's best to have someone experienced to watch your back. And then he was asked what he thinks you should do when you want to feel your own strength and not put yourself in danger. The secret of the goody builders was a supported lying down smoke exercise. He was asked to tear it up and not worry about those behind him, while they would send all their muscle power forward. They were shouting for the coca to try to withstand the roar of their chest muscles. The cocas were just flying around the battlefield. Their cries could be heard everywhere, and their feathers were flying all over the field. Ghoul shouted that they had succeeded, and that this was enough to win. He was very happy and thanked everyone for all the time they had spent together. 0.3 seconds is enough time to understand whether someone is interesting or disgusting, because 486 seconds had passed since the first meeting, and a guy came up behind Hull and grabbed him by the muscles. This was enough time for the 3 swordsmen to respond to the call of the goody builder's pectoral muscles. But Hugo didn't understand what it was and looked angrily at his opponent. A giant chicken stood in front of them and looked down at the 3 friends, because the cocks also answered that call and came to the rescue. Samuel was also confused and asked what it was like to hold a ghoul under his armpits. They thought the jacket size was more suitable for the dragon than for her. A long time ago there lived a great dragon, as ancient letters said, and this ancient dragon was very eager to rise to glory. But this choice was to divide the forces. So that is how the current dragons were born. The boy stood at the bottom and realized that even though it was not a dragon, even with this victory he could get the recognition of his mentor and ran to attack. Harden thought about it, because they say that muscles in novice athletes usually grow faster. But compared to bodybuilders, his muscle mass doesn't grow at all. Still, he was pleased that these newcomers were following him around. 3 months have already passed, and they were still suffocated, dying, and could only complain. And then I had to teach them step by step as if they were real ignorant. They even wanted to give up and stop practicing, but it was only temporary. Their stubbornness alone made sure that none of them surrendered. They developed beautiful muscles, but he did not understand why even he was happy about it. The boy looked up and did not know why he needed the firm hand of a mentor so much today. He thought about it, because he remembered that his mentor had also disappeared around his age. He was about to suggest something, but his thoughts were interrupted by one of his students who was running toward him. He explained that there had been a catastrophe, that the coca had suddenly evolved, and now they were all in danger. He was angry, but said that at this rate they could all die. Harden's face showed no emotion, and he realized that he was just asking him to show him which way it was. He pointed in the direction where his friends and Coke were, frightened. A warning was displayed that the energy detected exceeded the capacity of the combat compression muscles. But the system asked him to stop this skill, and his muscles kept growing. The coach was very angry and wondered who dared to attack his kids. The combat compression muscle skill stopped and the guy made a jump. His foot was too big. In the sky, the students saw something very bright and thought it was their coach coming to help them. Ryan and his friend tried to strike at the giant chicken. The young man asked his friend to distract the enemy, and he would try to hit the vital organs. And the guy started to fulfill his promise. He wanted to use a secret technique of sand scattering. He shouted to Sam that he had bought him some time with the sand pile and that he should run away now. He started shouting that he hadn't done it in vain, because he had to attack and now Ryan might be in danger. And so it happened. Coco struck the guy hard and he flew away. Samuel could not understand the Navi's thumbs up and told them to ignore him and just fight to the best of their abilities. Hugo turned to the boy and said that their friend had paid attention to them, which he liked. The guy started telling Sam to run away, because even at full strength they would not be able to defeat those chickens, and he ran in the opposite direction from them. He was worried because he thought it was too late and that he would be unable to escape and die, but it was too early to give up. Goody builders began to attack and use their secret. According to their version, one stood on the shoulder of the other. Using the ladder principle, the garden is united by support and you build everything into a pyramid. They tried to support each other and told them to hold on and believe in their friends who had gone to call for help from the coach. And the disciples were convinced that Harden would come before they all fell before the enemy. With the last of his strength, Goal shouted for them to hold on and believe in their friends. At that moment, a giant chicken pounced on them and broke the pyramid, and everyone in it began to fall down. They were injured a lot and it was hard to lift them. And Sam was running between them and asking if they were okay. Of course it was lunchtime. But tragedy has taken everything now. And many chickens you are standing over them looking at them with your teary eyes. The barrel of energy fell on them, and there was a big explosion, resulting in a lot of blood that spread across the lawn. They began to draw the attention of their friends to the place where the incident occurred, and said that their coach was on time. But the old lord came out of the smoke and they realized that it was not a coach after all. Everyone was very shocked. They did not expect such a turn of events. They had many questions and asked why he was here, because they were actually waiting for their leader. The guy looked stern and said that he had arrived in the wrong place. Many Kokas surrounded the old lord. He was very angry and aggressive. He exhaled heavily and asked them if that was all they could do. Samuel noticed that this monster looked like the Lord of the Gulls, and assumed that it was stronger than those birds because he had seen it attack. One of them asked him to watch carefully what would happen next. He explained that it was the treasure of their settlement, Mr. Old Lord, like no other. The cocks were watching the man closely and sternly, and he asked why they were looking at him like that, or if they thought he had come to them without preparation. Everyone else was very happy when they heard this, because they were sure that he had a plan, because even he could not cope with them face to face. He looked like a madman and started shouting that he, like the old lord, had pissed them off properly. So now it was up to Mr. Harden to defeat them. Then he fell to his knees and started shouting that now his way out was to look up to the sky. The students were very anxious and did not understand why their coach did not appear and where he was now. Even the Lord began to worry about it and call him by name while looking directly at the giant chicken. 6 hours earlier, he had come out of his lodge and stretched and wondered why today's hunt had taken so long. Grabbing his grumbling stomach, he realizes that he has already run out of food and thinks he needs to meet them halfway. And he was confident in his actions because cocatrix was gone and he assumed that there would be no danger either. Minutes before it all happened, he was in the woods and heard the goody builders screaming. The old lord was very angry with those who dared to throne him and his lord. Because no one but him or Harden dared to offend the goody builders, he began to reach for the stone. Lord was different in that he did not take part in bodybuilding training. He used his weightlifting skills to help Harden train, but still, his position did not get any lower, and he was even surprised by the training and how it was no joke. No one knew how he managed to maintain his authority. Perhaps the trained goody-goodies were still inferior to him. Another option could be that there has been a revision of values in this world. But it didn't fit either, and the reason was just one look at the guy. He had no choice but to upgrade his skills to remain the Lord's right-hand man, and tried to make his load even heavier. And one day he noticed that his burden had reached the maximum level, and he used 1/10 of his strength to lift the stone. When he picked up the stone, he released it on your trigger and made it even heavier, wishing death to the chicks. Because it was 10 times heavier, the stone made a big explosion as it landed in the ground with great speed. Looking at the cats, he didn't know what to do now, because it seemed like he had made a mistake. People started telling him that he could still hit them and impress her, and they assumed that he would be as good as their coach. Then he began to think, because not everyone can defeat such a community in one go. Looking at his subjects, He realized that he was born a Lord of the Gulls, so it was ridiculous to compare his abilities with ordinary guys. And then the old lord shouted that he would fight the winged chickens and that he would simply destroy them. But Coco still struck harder and he flew away for a long distance while the others watched and were disappointed because they now thought they were finished. Hugo began to turn to his friends and apologize for not always laughing at their jokes. Ryan was a little surprised because they weren't joking, and the guy started calling Sam. He laughed a little and asked if they kept their sense of humor to the very end. Then the guy turned back to the hens and said that he was sure he would miss them in the afterlife. Samuel shouted that his end would not be a lonely one because he was with his friends. They joined them, and the gullies said that they were also afraid to the last muscle cell that they would have to break. They began to run on the attack, and in their minds they thanked Harden for the training. Because those trainings were very exhausting, but they were able to touch the real power at least a little bit. And since there is a rebirth, we wanted to experience his training and learn from him once again. At the time, Harden found the old lord near a broken stone from his landing. He was glad to see the master and began to speak for their servants. The boy was surprised when the old lord began to repeatedly ask him to save them. He began to receive messages that his composure skill had detected an excess of emotions and began to deactivate. There was a battle going on, but all of a sudden the chickens started running away, and it surprised the gulls, who did not understand where they were running to or why. The chickens gathered around the old lord and Harden, and he said that the voices of the ancestors would no longer continue, and his skill of composure was activated. He was even surprised that he was calmer than ever, but his composure skill again detected overwhelming emotions, and the system decided to check the player. The gulls started running fast somewhere. They said it was the call of the pectoral muscles, and that you were definitely their master. Sam was carrying Ryan, but decided to ask who they were talking about. They said that their mentor was a leader and the most thorough master of muscle development, and this explanation surprised the guy. Ghoul explained that it was better to see it all with your own eyes, and that all these long talks were useless. Another said that he should explain it to him in a simple way so that even a beginner could understand. Then he simply said that this was their new lord of the house, whose name was Harden, and they were proud of him. But that was not enough for him. The chickens started to attack the boy, but he cheerfully raised one hand and stopped the attack. But the one-handed press made such a difference that Coco was shocked. All the chickens disappeared, flying up into the sky and starting to fall. For him, it was just a workout. He would use the army press, then strain his shoulder group. When all of their paws came together in one point, I used a pulp hose to help them. The guy could easily handle it, even striking in the air. The ancestors said that they were answering the call of the pectoral muscles, which strive for evolution. So he called them with his muscles, and they quickly found him. With the help of his chest, he will be able to engage their pectoral muscles to the depths. Harden was very strict and asked if they could do something like that with him. He turned on the crossover mode and first came to the burpee test by jumping up to the top and assuming the push-up position. The chickens wanted to strike him, but they couldn't do it because there was a response, and one of them fell down, and blood began to splatter from its head. His muscles grew tenfold, and he said he was going to start swinging weights. First, he did an upward exercise, and many cats shifted their weight and flew upward. The next exercise he decided to do was a squat with a jumping up and down, with a giant tree on his shoulders. And when he started, the tree overtook the coccyx and caused them severe injuries. Next, he decided to do exercises to strengthen the triceps and threw a tree at them with great speed. Many of them were already lying dead, their souls leaving their bodies. His students had already come running nearby, and 3 more boys were silently watching what was happening on the lawn. They were very surprised and asked if this was the Lord of the Gulls, because it was impossible. The boy himself mocked them, asking if this was the whole power of the monsters. He was frustrated because by the time he got there, his lower body was already tired. I started thinking about whether he could end it all quickly with a couple of strongest blows. He thought that he would give up here and remembered how the old lord had said that I was already dying from using up my mana. Then he asked him to kill him rather than endure such torment, and how, if he did, he would no longer be able to look directly into the eyes of the Lord, who had been helping him all along. So he thought that he should do it just once and finish it all in one strong movement. He bent his arms to do a chest press, and for just 1 repetition, he increased his pectoral muscles. He received a message that he needed to reduce the muscle mass of his upper body, because his lower body was already collapsing. His disciples and boys came to his aid and began to hold his upper body. Everyone started saying that now it's strength training with support. And this did not give the guy the strength to say yes, of course, and go on a trigger attack. He was able to defeat them, and many of them were falling dead on the ground, and he thanked everyone for their help. Everyone was lying on the ground in joy, and the guy told everyone that the training was over for the day. They all looked up, and he said that they would miss the old lord very much. The ghoulies began to talk to each other and said that before Harden came, he was evil, but under his leadership, he became a great boss. The guy started thinking about who would help him with his training and got upset. When he turned in their direction, he saw that they quickly began to look away, and he thought it was not gratitude. The old lord got up and said that he had worked very hard today, but he was still angry with his disciples, and said that they would get what they wanted from him when they returned. After these words, everyone was very shocked and turned in his direction. Nor asked him what was wrong with them, and he decided that it was not the time to interfere, so he decided to take a nap. They all gathered together and jumped on him with joy, and I got scared and told them to stay away from him because they were scaring him. They hugged him and rejoiced that he was alive, and the Lord asked them to stop doing that, because he was really going to die. Harden was especially happy, and said it was good that he came and asked him to help with training in the future. His friends returned to playing Wardo, and the man was calm when they told him that someone had personally defeated a group of cocatrices, and he asked if he had killed cocatrice in the same way, and he was told yes. Leo assessed the situation and said that the monsters in the form of gulls would not be a danger to them, but that guy was dangerous, because it was unknown when other representatives of the species would bite their teeth, and I had to think it over very carefully to know what to do, and the commander asked where Sam was. Hugo and Reyna were in tears and didn't know how to tell him. Let him start feeling the guy's muscles everywhere, and Samuel didn't realize what he was doing. The guys were aggressive and asked the foreigner if he wanted to harm their friend. The guy was very surprised to see Hugo's muscles and said it was really amazing. They were aggressive and warned him not to dare treat him like a thing. When the trainer asked him if he wanted to become stronger than I was now, he asked him to look up and stop too. He used both his hands to restrain their attack and hold back their swords and repeated his question. With a cheerful expression on his face, he said that if he didn't mind, he could train with him. The word training surprised Samuel. He did not know what it was. They were crying when she told them all this, and that they had no choice but to give Sam to that guy. The boys begged their mentor to save their friend from the hands of those monsters. Leo thought that the training was some kind of black magic, but there was no information and said that he felt sorry for the soldier. But he could not put the country in danger in such a situation. He added that their mentor was not so free to give in to feelings at such a time. He told them to leave and start training with their minds. But Ryan stood up and began to glow, telling them to send all the soldiers into battle. Leo explained that it was impossible to give in to emotions now, but the guy was shouting for them to move. The commander said that the guy had overstepped the boundaries because he had captured his student. She left the room and called her students with her, saying that today they would clean up Ali's mine. At the training session, the good guys made an announcement that a new student had joined them, so they would go over the material they had learned and start with squats. The guy was a little worried because he didn't understand what a squat was, and then the coach decided to call him over and show him by example. Squats are a great sport that helps you develop your thigh muscles through steady work with your weight. He decided to ask if his name was Sam, and asked if he would try to sit down comfortably. It's easier to say this when you're standing up and sitting down, but when you're moving your own weight to avoid injury, you need to maintain the correct position. Then he told Sam to spread his legs to the width of his pelvis, but first he showed him how to do it. He asked me to make sure that my knees were pointing toward the middle fingers, and then to use my pelvis and knees to sit down. After the first time, he was ordered to give strength to his pelvis and hips, and then to stand up pushing off the ground. Harden praised him and said it was great for a first time, and asked if he had played sports before, but he was just learning to use the sword, and then the coach told him to sit down again. He took a barbell in his hands, and told me not to relax my abs, and asked if I would try to raise my arms vertically, and he would give me the barbell. He lifted it to his shoulders and asked him to prepare himself because it was heavy. The coach shouted at him to stay in position and climb up. It was very difficult for the guy, but he managed to lift the bar up. Then he took it away from him, and the other disciples began to applaud and shout praise to Sam. This surprised him because his weight was close to the limit, but he managed to stand without breaking his stance. He watched him closely and realized that his eyes were definitely not deceiving him, but I thought he had an exemplary powerlifting equipment. Then let him decide to ask him if he followed him only because he wanted to become stronger. Sam started shouting that he wanted to be as strong as his friends. Let him prepare to make a fortune and say that unfortunately he will not be able to become a son like his friends. But this did not surprise him, because an ordinary guy like him could not keep up with geniuses. He began to thank him for his guidance, and believed that even with his guidance, he would be able to at least try to follow them a little bit. But Harden asked what he was whispering under his breath. The coach told him that he would become strong in a different sense. So strong that his friends' pitifully current skills would not compare, and the guy was surprised that he had the best talent in the world. It was the first time he had ever heard someone make such a confession, and he cried, but he was asked not to because it was bad for his muscles. The coach was holding small cocas and was asked by the Navi why he had brought them. Harden explained that it is possible to hunt them, but how? and that if you hunt them without thinking about the consequences, you may soon run out of chicken breasts. And so he wanted to try to breed them before that happened. He said there were no difficulties in growing them quickly, because here in Ali's mind there are almost no monsters that could defeat the coxie. It was fortunate that they became stronger, but still, as they evolve, no one but him can handle it like that. He looked slyly at the fear of hunger and wondered if no one could really cope. He was a little embarrassed by this and said that of course everyone would be able to change their minds. Harden hugged him and asked why he sounded like a weakling, which almost disappointed him, and the old lord apologized for it. They were training on the training ground and doing barbell squats, and the trainer told them to use their lead thigh muscles to resist gravity. Sam also squatted, but he was assisted by the old lord, who did 1/10 weights. He tried not to give up and said that he had to do it on the way up. Then the man shouted that they were starting and doubled the weight. The lord encouraged him and told him that he could do it, even if he was screaming, but he got up. The coach noticed Sam's efforts and was happy for him, and the other ghoulies tried to keep up. During the training, a warrior came and struck me with an omniscient sword. Many of them were injured by the impact, and there was a lot of smoke. Everyone started coughing, and the old lord did not understand what it was, and it was hard for him to get up a little. The commander stood over him and asked if he was the shameless monster who had taken his student. The old lord said that he was misunderstanding something, because it was the first time he had seen her, and he had been taken away from his place as a lord. She raised her sword and was about to strike him, because she needed a yes or no answer. But the trainer defended him and said that dogs don't bark even during sports, and asked who she was. She was surprised that he was able to stop her sword with his body. He cut his skin a little, and it bled, and he thought how dare she leave a wound on his muscles. Then she asked Ryan and Hugo if it was him, that she understood everything correctly. They agreed with her statement and started shouting to Sam, who had brought his mentors with him, asking him to come back to them, showing them his tears. At the time, she apologized for interrupting his training, but still said that she shouldn't have lured someone else's student to her side. He was surprised and asked the guys if he had a coach before, because in that case it's not polite. He realized that he liked this kind of training more than fencing. He said that he could have just answered that there was no need to mumble to himself, something under his breath. Then the boy bowed and apologized to his mentor and said that he liked training with him more than sword fighting. He was embarrassed that they had come for him here and apologized again. She said that he had a new mentor, and she showed no emotion. It will come to be clear that nothing can be done about it. She began to behave aggressively and said that if the student made a wrong decision, she would have to use force. When the commander was attacking with the stroke of an invincible sword, his muscles began to pose and grow. Showing all his muscles, he hurt her pride badly, because she was only able to scratch him again with her sword, and that was it. And then she asked Sam if he wanted the same body on, which he said was cool, and he did. And the commander suggested the following. She would fight the foreigner, and whoever won would be able to take him for themselves. She asked if the winner's martial art would be the strongest, but the guy corrected her and explained that Trini is not a martial art. It is more like self-education through victory over the resistance of one's own will. She couldn't understand him because he had defeated cocatrix and thought that he was thanking her for helping him. But he said that it was just for the sake of the squirrel, because he always fights just to survive. And I was very surprised, because it turned out that his training was of no practical use. He was very angry with her and how she was telling lies. Amalia started laughing at him, saying that she had touched him and asked what was the point of his self-education. With a smile on her face, she said that trainers are a useless thing. Such behavior and words made him very angry, and he decided to show her a real trainer. All the disciples were very curious to know who was stronger, their lord or the human woman. Hull asked to see their physical fitness, because the woman could not possibly be a good match for him. But one could not judge just by looking at the body of the compound that she would be among the 10 strongest warriors on the continent. Harden activated his hawk's eye, and it showed that he was a man, and his profession was swordmaster. He didn't understand how she was able to heal his wounds, since she had very little muscle, because he believed that it was impossible to cut his muscles with a sword. Amalia was a little surprised and asked him what kind of martial art he was teaching. Well, as for her fencing skills, she showed them by striking him from above. The guy was very shocked. He did not understand what kind of village it was, and you could see the scratches on his arm. The commander explained that this is an ability that uses combat energy to help deal with the enemy, and I decided to give him a couple of lessons as an older friend in life. He tried to protect the world from her blows and did not understand what was happening. She decided to ask him if he wasn't curious why she called him a foreigner, even though he looked like a local. But he didn't care and decided to strike with his fist. The woman held it up and said it was because his mana color was red, and the mana of demonic creatures was set to red, and also the way he used it during the fight and prepared his sword. Jumping down, she added that ordinary people don't have techniques that can change their bodies. The guy was able to bounce back with his curls with the help of a leg press. He shouted that she didn't even know the basics, because the body changes, how to make an effort. This is what I meant to happen, because only such methods were characteristic of foreigners like him. And ordinary people can use combat energy or mana, and it began to use its combat energy of blades of destruction, and many such shining blades surrounded him from all sides, which confused him. This energy complemented their insufficiently strong skills. She said that his training was useless for people and he felt a lot of pain. The commander asked if he understood what she was saying, repeating that the trainers were useless. The woman came closer to him and asked how they could beat the art of fencing, which is all about defeating the enemy every day. He asked with difficulty whether the enemy was standing still. Harden got up and repeated her question, changing it slightly to how much stronger her opponent would be tomorrow. Amalia smiled and asked why she should worry about it. She said that today's enemy simply will not live to see the next meeting with his blade of destruction ready. The guy stood up and said that they all who work out in the gym always get stronger to beat their yesterday selves. He grew 10 times bigger and said that it was his turn to teach her where and what. A guy approached Sam and asked if they could talk for a while. Ryan and Hugo stood in front of him, a little embarrassed, not sure how to do it right. The boy began to apologize to him for bringing the mentor, because they thought they would never see him again, even though they realized that after that he would hate them. The guy himself is a little confused about what they are talking about and why he might hate them. They explained that it was because he had left them, because they had always given money to him, but it wasn't like that. He stayed just because he wanted to try it, and when he graduated, he was going to come back, and even his coach gave him permission to do so. The guys were very much surprised by this, but they were happy to hear the news, and they were curious to know what kind of training he was doing, because once he decided, they wanted to learn it with him. But he couldn't really explain it yet, since he had only recently started his studies and asked the old lord if he could help. While the battle between the coaches was going on, Lord gladly decided to help them. Sam decided to ask them if they remembered what they learned in the first place when they met their mentor and started fencing. The district shouted out that the correct answer would be feet, and it was exactly right. The guy explained that the exercise they were about to do would also be for the legs, and it was called squats, which were especially effective for the thigh muscles. Harden explained that the trainer told him that the most important thing is to have the right posture for the exercise to be safe. The old lord was surprised and asked if it was too dangerous to increase the weight so suddenly without a system. But Sam just laughed it off and said that everything would be fine because he would be there to support. She was angry with him and asked why he was weakening his strength. But he didn't do that. He used force to attract, and in professional terms, this meant compression and stretching. During the struggle, she heard some strange sounds, and decided to ask Ryan and Hugo what those moans were. The woman was so surprised that she even blushed a little when she saw her students squatting. She grabbed me by the mouth and asked what kind of training I was doing, announcing a break. The guy was breathing heavily and said that it was a weighted squat and he was afraid that he would get injured in it. Amalia started apologizing and said that she suddenly wanted to send them to his training. The guy started to shrink and took his normal form and had questions. He asked her a little timidly how she felt about the training. The woman said it was a hot passion because she looked at the guys who were happy with their training, and then they made a deal to unite the coaches. He began to admire her forearm and asked her what sport she played, but she laughed because he was unusual to be interested in such things. Harden started waving his head, and that's when she realized everything, so she decided to tell him. In fact, there was nothing special because I was waving my sword all day. So maybe it all started and I wanted to ask him a question. Does he really mind teaching his special art for free like this? But for him, it was good to have a lot of people training. He thought it was better. Sitting on her horse, she did not understand why he thought so. Harden believed that gyms would open everywhere, and that research would be conducted and new training programs would be created. And how, if possible, he would like to see the culture of gymnastics reach every corner of Laisha's world. She noticed that he was more interesting than he seemed at first glance. The whole settlement saw her off, and she said that she liked him, so whenever he wanted, she could listen to his request. In the evening, Sam approached the coach and said that discrimination was rampant in the county where he lived, and not only species differ from humans, but also other religions, and how, in other words, the swordsmen hold power over everyone. Young people like him do less of this, but he was worried that their feelings with the goody builders would not be hurt. After biting off a piece, he realized that it was a serious problem. Sam suggested waiting a while and then thinking about a new visit. The boy went to a large cauldron and looked at what was being cooked there. It was rough and a bit hard, but I decided that it was the main dish to keep me healthy. He started to eat actively because it was pure carbohydrates, but only horses ate them and it was very serious. A man and a woman looked at the boy and said that they had lost their appetite because he ate with the animals. Amalia said that it was normal that monsters don't even know how to eat, The old lord came up to them and said that the monsters would be shattered if they heard that. He cooked a dish where he decided to combine their combat provisions and gave them a taste. They were a little surprised that it was their food, and the smell was not so bad. They liked it very much, because the sweet taste was later accompanied by notes of spice. The woman loved the spicy taste of the fire. Her appetite returned and she thought it was a culinary masterpiece. He said that he might give them a recipe for how to become friends and asked them not to offend the monsters anymore, and they agreed to it. The guy approached them and was told that they were leaving tomorrow morning. He asked her if she remembered that she had promised to fulfill his request in the afternoon. He brought them oats and said that he wanted to get this plant. She said it was cattle feed, and since she had heard that they were raising coxie, she asked if he wanted to feed them, but he just laughed and said that they would eat it themselves. The commander was surprised and felt guilty for giving him pet food. The ghoulies approached him and said he shouldn't have used this chance to ask her for cattle feed because she was a high-ranking person. He got a little angry with them and asked what he was saying, and she couldn't say that they were wrong. If he had asked for something, she could have given him much more, because she could change their tent homes into real wooden houses. And in order not to walk around naked, she could have dressed them in real adventurers' armor. They were very surprised by this, and said that they already had a lot of coca lumps, but it wasn't like that. He explained that it was harmful to eat only protein, and that it was too much of a burden and harmful to the liver. And if you eat enough carbohydrates, glycogen is released, which helps you gain more strength. It was especially oats, which contain enough different carbohydrates to make you feel full for longer. And the calorie content is low, and there are many useful elements. He shouted at them, asking if oats were the best reward for their bodies. At first they thought about it a bit, but then they started shouting that they wanted to try it. They thought it washes, some kind of secret that would help him match their troops. Hugo said that he hated losing to monsters, and Ryan suggested that they try it too. They saw that their friend had already started eating it, and decided to try it anyway. Everyone began to drive you very actively from where the horses were eating. Ryan asked Sam to spit it out, because it tasted terrible, because even the goodie builders spit it out. The guy liked the stiffness of the chew and said it was delicious. Harden was shocked that he even had a talent for eating, and suggested that he would soon become strong. Amalia apologized, although she didn't understand it, but everyone was satisfied, and she decided to try to convince the Count to meet his demands. The guy was very happy and said that she was really the best, although the other one would say that she was still in the red. You didn't start blowing the trumpet until the commander announced that he had returned and ordered her to open the door. While they were looking at everything, Sam whispered that he meant it. It was a performance by Wardo, who was considered the best king of discrimination on the continent. A coach came up to them and told them why they were acting like that, why people were looking at them, so they should pose better. He said that their bodies looked great, so they all come to see them. She didn't believe it and began to examine her body, touching her muscles. But when they started posing to walk toward the gate, no one even paid attention to them. Leo was sitting on his throne and asked if he would leave after the training in the trend technique. He asked if he wanted to receive animal feed as a reward, but Harden decided to correct him and said that it was not cattle feed, but oats, and they are the main component of a healthy diet. The man realized from his language that he was from a barbaric people. He said that at the request of his commander of the knights, he would make an exception and let them into the kingdom, because if it wasn't for that request, they would have been shot with an arrow outside the gate and would have become like hedgehogs. Then the commander bowed and thanked him for his patience. He did not tell him not to make any noise, but simply taught him the trick quietly and peacefully and left. The guy agreed to this and said that when he finished his work, he could come and keep him company. The man was very angry and called him insolent as you were walking to the exit. He was disappointed that the mentor was so popular that he feared she would win over the people's feelings to her side. And I was very happy that everything turned out so well that I could not even imagine it. At the time, he did not tell his other subjects to call the mercenary order the title, but he thought that her guests would bring problems to the commander. They arrived at the soldiers' training field and were all stopped and told that they would have a special training today. The man said that he was accompanied by a special mentor whom Commander Amalia brought and introduced him as Lord Ghoulie. They started to settle down because they realized that he was a monster, but they did not understand what he would teach them. The man said that he understood their discontent, but that if they did not show honor, it would be considered a violation of military law, so he told them to think carefully. The guy was in a very good mood. He introduced himself and said that today he would be in charge of their training. But since he did not like their views, he ordered everyone to fall down and do push-ups. Sam was eating and told them not to look at him like that, but to do as they were told. He showed me how to do it, and his students followed him and asked if they were going to do push-ups. The guy tried to make them do it and told them to do it faster. It looked very funny to the soldiers and they began to doubt whether to do it. One of the soldiers started shouting to the others and asked if they were going to obey the monster. Their trainer said that an order had come from the commander to strictly follow the monster's instructions during training. Then this guy asked him if he thought so too. The guy did not react at all to the fact that they were arguing over whether to follow the monster's words and whether they were equal to the words of their commander. You ordered everyone to stand up and asked if they were going to obey the monster, because you believed that you could not lose the authority of the people. The man said that orders in the army are absolute, and when the boy got up, he asked what the problem was. They said that there were many problems, and the first was that they were people and did not obey monsters. Secondly, the practical benefits of his training, because they had no reason to give up fencing in favor of some other type of training. And the third is that people are unwilling to learn the barbaric methods of training monsters and draw their swords. Then the old lord stepped in and said he could resolve the conflict. The first problem could have been solved by Sam becoming an assistant coach and then having a human teach them, but then they would not obey the monster's orders. Secondly, he did not know what practical benefit was greater than fencing, because he had never compared it. But they could have dueled between nations. He didn't know how barbaric those methods were and wanted to settle it in a fair fight. Then he turned to the other ghoulies and asked if everyone was ready for this. This offer satisfied the warrior, and he accepted it. And he came out from the people's side and asked who would be from them. He started laughing, thinking that they thought he was a simple student, so he thought they were out of luck. He wanted to show them the horror of the elite title squad under the personal command of the Count. He rushed over and told them all to die by swinging his sword. The student on the other side was a little surprised, but he had already prepared a one-armed press. Then he threw a punch, after which the coach started asking if he was okay, and the student was glad that the guy was alive. The mentor started to tell him off, but he should have gone easy on him, since he doesn't work out to show off his strength. He apologized, and his mentor forgave him, saying that he definitely did not do it out of anger, and did not understand what he wanted from him. Let him start speaking and say that since they had lost, they now had to listen to him carefully. The guy began to fill with combat energy and glow. He was very aggressive and wanted to attack from behind, and he told them not to dare to order him. Ghoul was very much surprised, and the old lord quickly reacted and made the burden 10 times greater. Then the coach started running fast and moved ahead of his student. He hit him so hard in the chest that he flew back into the wall. One day Amalia came to visit them and asked Harden if they were doing well. Everyone thought he used magic because it looked so much like it. The warriors were sure that he had also used magic during the fight and were convinced that monsters could not be trusted. Amalia could not understand what was happening there and asked her mentor to report on the situation. He reported that there was an opinion that monsters should not be obeyed, so a competition was held, and their warrior lost in this duel, which led to the idea that the monsters were cowards and used magic. Then the mentor decided to ask the boy himself if he had really used magic. He confidently said that he hadn't used anything like it during the competition. Then she turned to her mentor and passed on his words. Her husband agreed with her, and also felt nothing of the sort during the fight, and was asked if he believed the monster's words. Lev explained that he was passing by and decided to come out when he heard impossible words. He stared at the commander and wanted to hear an explanation. Then I decided to ask the question of whose side she was on. The side of Count Wardo's people or the side of those low-grade monsters. Amalia was a little surprised by this question, and said that she was, of course, on the Count's side. Then I asked her whose words she was listening to. The guy was very happy to see him, and said that he had come for a personal training session, and told him to get down from the horse quickly. The old lord came up to him and said that this was probably not true, and asked him to step back. Leo asked sternly if the commentator knew how much he appreciated her, and she did. He said that the guests she brought had harmed their country, because they damaged the body of one of the students and sealed the place. He added that they caused disorder among the other students, who did not look well at these guests. And as the head of these lands, he could not just leave this situation alone. Leo made an announcement that since he was playing, he was putting all the responsibility on the commander and ordering him to be sent to the prison for 2 years. People began to rebel and asked him to cancel the order, saying that they would rather kill all the monsters. Amalia liked this, so she ordered everyone to be quiet. She asked how they dared to disobey the Count's order, and how they could call themselves county soldiers after that. But they kept trying to argue until the command to be quiet came again. She thought they were yellow-mouthed people who only knew how to humiliate others, but they learned to contradict those above them, so there is room for change. She said that she would have to leave to give rise to a new generation with talents and thank the Count, and would use his care and for how long she would go on vacation. He calmed down a bit because he was very scared when he saw her face. Then she apologized to the boyfriend, or she brought him there. But she couldn't take care of him to the end. He said that we cannot follow the same course. Amalia appealed to the Count that he had promised to allow these monsters to be admitted within 3 months, and he said he would keep this promise. She was happy about this turn because she had already prepared the groundwork. And it was only a matter of time before the seeds of change began to germinate. And only now did the soldiers realize that it was going to the silo. She was very cheerful and said that I would have a lot of fun when I returned. A man came out of the gate holding a bag with something, and he realized that a couple more times like this, and he would stop doing such a nasty job. He knew that some people liked flowers and thought about opening a flower shop. The boy opened the material and asked his daughter to wait a little longer because her father would be back soon. Everything was on fire. The whole house was in flames. People were fleeing wherever they could. They looked terrible and very thin, bleeding from the eyes, nose, and mouth. Someone was watching the whole settlement burn, and people fussing. Then he turned to Elsa and said that he hadn't seen anything like this for a long time and he really liked it. He shouted that his beautiful homeland was happy to welcome them. The guy got down on one knee and stretched out his hand, asking her for a dance. The girl hesitated at first, but eventually gave him her hand, and he spun her around in a dance over the burning settlement. All the people went to the bridge and began to read their prayers, wishing her health and return with renewed vigor. Amalia didn't understand why Samuel was here with her, and a big backpack. He explained that there was no training that day, and a meeting was held. And so he decided to keep asking the coach if he could hold it, and he got a positive answer. Then she offered to visit him on the way, but the boy didn't know if it was possible because he was afraid of the count. The woman said that everything was fine, and asked if he thought she was so weak that she was not capable of doing it. The guy was very happy and said he would trust her and take her there. She praised him and said that he had more strength in his voice than before, which was very good. You said that when he gets a little stronger, he'll be able to take him as a bride. He was a little confused because the woman was already in her 60s, and he was only in his early 20s. Ryan and Hugo began to hold their mentor and ordered their friend to run because she was angry that he was starting to talk over his age. One of the ghoulies was practicing and asked his friend if his hands were not tired, but everything was going very well. But he was joking and told them to carry it faster because their coach would be able to teach them new techniques. Amalia saw the monsters and greeted them, asking what kind of slime they had this time. They were very surprised to see them as Sam had said he was only going to see her off. The guy was a little embarrassed and said that it had just happened. The teams apologized for their question and how they did not answer it. They told her that Harden said he needed mucus. This surprised her greatly. She did not know how he was going to use them, because even medicine would not come out of them. They offered to go with them, but I didn't see any point in long conversations, thinking it was better to see everything with my own eyes at least once. Then the woman asked if their coach hadn't explained anything to them at all, and Sam said that it was better to just leave because the goodie builders couldn't explain it properly. When the young man saw the coach, he started waving and greeting him. He was also glad to see them and thought that they walk with lunges at that time. The old lord could see that the slippery ones were trying to escape. The woman explained that she had decided to visit him on her way to the silo to make sure one last time and was curious about what he was doing. And the lord ordered his subjects to pile them up with their breasts. And she decided to ask what he was going to do with those slugs. He explained that he had watched the training sessions in absentia and realized that they would not be particularly effective in the bodybuilding or powerlifting style. In this case, training with a sports coach would be better, and since he had little equipment, he decided to do it himself. Then she asked me if creating equipment from weeks is like a scarecrow that needs to be cut up. But he corrected her and said that it was like in swordsman's training, when he ordered his guys to bring him slime of any color. He started by saying that when you have Sode around, you have to strike from above and showed how to do it. And how if you take away a small round particle inside for a few days, it recovers again. And he handed this piece to the old lord, and added that in order to deliver them to the restoration, those round things had to be assembled separately. And inside the mucus of the mucus where the recovery points were left, it is necessary to make a hole, because their elasticity and compressibility are phenomenal. How? That you can use it by simply stretching it with your hands like this and showing it to me. And by making such movements, you can create a training belt, for example, and its shape will be preserved. But she might not have known that you can do a lot of exercises with this belt. Because the force of compression is different depending on the color, you can make your own exercise for each muscle group, and they can also be used to learn how to recover and warm up large areas of the body. She thanked him and apologized, and he didn't understand why she did it so suddenly. Amalia explained that she had been on guard all this time, and he probably did not know it. I was not sure that he loved training so much, and was so good-natured towards people. But she said that he is always sincere without any thoughts and throws himself into a new business. She added that she is a failed coach who was raised by the Wardo County system, which is full of discrimination. She explained that this is why she was raised to follow the count's lead. Her mood changed because he was different and that he could bring change to that country. At first he thought about it, then said that this was his specialty. but the woman had something else in mind. Then he asked for group training, but it was the wrong change. The changes she was talking about were standing right behind her when she pulled back her cloak. They didn't want to see what the monster instructor could teach them. And it wasn't because they lost in a duel. One of them told him not to even try to start his skating on the ground. And she asked him if she could entrust him with her students. At first he was a little nervous, but then he raised his hand and said, "Of course." But the winds of change were not only blowing near Harden, and Leo rode out of the county on his horse. They arrived at a village where everything was on fire and ordered them to get down from their horses. He said that their enemies were zombies from the undead, and that the most frightening feature of zombies was the ability to turn others into people like them. Therefore, he asked the soldiers to be careful and make sure that neither they nor their horses were bitten by them. Raising his sword in the direction of the enemy, he commanded the soldiers to attack. The boy turned to Bedorman and told him to be obedient and not to do anything stupid. And I started thinking, because if they manifested themselves now, Amalia could intervene. Then he hit his animal because it was barking and not listening to him. He asked him to wait a little longer and asked if Bedorman understood him. And he started laughing because he thought the zombies were just reconnaissance material. He lined them all up, and as he said before, there is a limit to the amount of power they can spend per day. And for this reason, they will train their muscles to increase this strength. The mentor repeated that only when they were done with stretching were they going to do the press. But the guy suggested that he take up cross-country instead. But the man didn't know what it was, so he asked the coach what the word meant. He explained that CrossFit is a training system developed by Greg Glassman and can be described as a way of training including the length of training of different intensities. In other words, it is a sport that aims not to create the so-called hexagon by setting different body functions. And what about training in groups? Then synergy can arise between the participants, and this affects the competition, so that if the relationship is not very warm, there is no more effective way than this. He reported all the groups to the old lord, so it is advisable to check with him and wish them to have a full training session. All the students were very excited and began to shout with joy at the news. Someone was having a terrible and bloody battle with zombies with rivers of blood everywhere. And someone was actively training and building up his muscles, something he had been doing all his life. The guy decided to ask about the sound he had heard since the last time, but did not know what it meant. The mentor explained that zombies often appear in settlements outside the county, and the count personally travels to fight them, and he assumed that the enemies were stronger than they thought, so someone was always sending a signal asking for reinforcements. Suddenly, he started yelling at the fourth group and told them to reduce their weight because the whole pose was collapsing. The mentor was a little tearful because he assumed that the boy hadn't been listening to him all along. Leo raised his sword and praised his soldiers because they had done a good job. He reported the information he had learned from the scouts that there was an enemy base nearby, and this time he offered to destroy them once and for all and bring peace to their country. A large number of soldiers shouted and cheered, supporting their leader in his actions. Then the county governor ordered his soldiers to attack and fulfill their duty to the country. They believed in the count's words and actions, so they ran decisively into battle, attacking the zombies. His assistant came up behind him and asked if they had gone too far by going to such a group. But for him it was nonsense, because I thought they were not smart, and therefore did not have tactics and strategy, which meant only pushing them back with force and intelligence. While they were fighting, he asked to see it himself, and hoped that his soldiers were already pushing them back. He ordered us not to slow down, because war is a battle of strength of spirit. He told them not to stop until they had completely destroyed the enemy as they approached him. The guy laughed at him because he assumed that he was only thinking that way. When he snapped his fingers, the beast appeared while Leo's troops surrounded him, and the monster proclaimed that the organizer of this battle, Mr. Benjamin, would now come out. He saw that they did not know much about the war while they were running with their swords to attack. He believed that we should use spears, because swords are only for showing off our strength, and he ordered his monsters to go forward and bite them. Looking at this, it was difficult to even help someone who was standing next to you, and the enemy could not be stopped from trying to break through. The man shouted Benjamin and jumped up, swinging his sword. The guy was happy because they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and he was able to stop his attack without any difficulty. He was surprised that the young man remained the same, and he had managed to grow old, and he said that he didn't even know how to control combat energy as freely as Commander Amali. He started laughing because he hadn't even trained his combat energy, unlike him. But he was doing some research and capsules with needles appeared between his fingers. Then he stuck it in himself, and some strange liquid spread through his body. His body was deformed and his muscles grew several times, which surprised him. Leo couldn't believe that Benjamin had gone as far as experimenting on the human body. He began to think that his consciousness was unstable. He looked down at the warriors fighting, and thought that he had to defeat Ben before anyone could interfere. His aura began to glow, and he ordered the unrepentant spirit to return to the other world. But Ben's giant hand knocked him off the path and he flew off in the opposite direction. The man was surprised and did not understand what kind of speed and power it was. But I thought that I would have died on the spot if he had hit it, unable to withstand such force. By launching an attack, he wanted to predict the trajectory of his attack. He tried to strike, but Benjamin didn't even feel it, and he realized that he was inferior in strength. The guy hit him hard and the man realized that he was wrong and he was too strong for him. Even though he used a completely wrong method, he wondered how he managed to get so much power. Benjamin started laughing hard and asked if he was thinking about it. He explained that it was simple, because this development is just civilization, and asked if he knew that he was conscious. Because the non-stove men always gave up everything except their precious fencing. They became weaklings. He looked at him menacingly and said that they had no development. But the man corrected him because he knew the strength of the commander, so he did not understand how he could say such a thing. As soon as he heard Amalia's name, he immediately remembered her and knew everything. Benjamin was hostile and asked if he was familiar with the concept of average. Pointing to the battlefield, I offered him to see what the picture was like there. Leo, sweating a little, looked over to see what the painting was. Then he saw his warriors losing to the monster, screaming in pain, blood spurting from their mouths. He asked if he thought it was equal, which of course was not the case. It was just a massacre in which the one who exaggerated his strength won. In every business, there are always capable guys, but you can't take them as a benchmark. The man could not believe his eyes, because their different soldiers could not have lost this battle like that. The boy was tired of it because even such a lesson did not teach him anything. Then he realized that it was pointless and told him to die. His assistant told the count to retreat and that he would take on the monster, and the man began to run away quickly while they stood there and watched in amazement at his actions. Benjamin began to laugh out loud at the count's cowardice, who covered his mouth with his hand. He made sure that Leo continued to think only about himself. Then they started shouting at the soldiers to retreat and for everyone to do so. The man told them that they had lost, and now they had to make every effort to get to the county. It was necessary to follow the graph and then try harder for the next few days. The warriors jumped on their horses and began to run quickly and flee the battlefield. The monster asked the owner if they should pursue them, but Benjamin made a little face and said that it was not necessary, because they already knew where they were going to go next, because they had their own plans. The young man assumed his usual form, and knew that the count was too foolish to gather everyone together in one city to lead them on. But he laughed at the fact that he did not realize that he was helping them. Jumping on his horse, the count realized that he could not do what he had done, and I began to think about how to defeat those monsters, remembering their power. At the time, Harden and his students continued to train with a barbell. When he came back a little bit, he got angry with them, and asked if any of them wanted to report the situation. A guy approached him and introduced himself as the commander of Rumi's group, and the count ordered him to report. He said that out of 400 soldiers, 347 were killed or infected, and 27 were wounded, leaving 26 people left. The man recalled that there were still 100 soldiers in the county, and the rest were students or wounded. He was screaming and angry, because he could not understand how it was possible to fight when there were only 126 people in the army. Then the young man suggested that he call back Commander Amalia, but he said it was too late, because he was not sure how, that they would send for her now, that she would arrive on time. Then I asked him what he thought about joining forces with the monsters who are currently training in the county, because I heard that their leader was fighting on the same level as Commander Amalia. They gave them shelter and food, and if they asked for help, they would most likely not refuse to come out to fight. It was like wedging a wedge and asking if he was proposing to defeat monsters with monster strength. Then the count was very happy about this, and said that they would follow this path. A day later, they arrived at their castle and were greeted with music. And after that, they sent a man straight to the training field and told them to stop training, because he was announcing a joint training camp. His subject began to shout at them while they were standing there, and to move to fulfill the count's order. Sitting on his horse, he asked if the boy's name was Harden. He was cheerful and asked if he was here for a personal training session, but he said it was not true, because he came to give them an order. He said that it was time for them to repay them for the shelter and food they had been given. He announced that from that moment on, he was ordering to deal with the army of zombies that were gathering in the surrounding castles. Everyone was very surprised, and did not fully understand where he was. Some of them were a little confused. The man began to worry a bit because the monsters didn't look quite right, as if they didn't understand his words. Then he gave them an epiphany that enabled them to die with honor, and the boys were promised to be granted the status of citizens by the player Wardo on a special basis. He thought it was the best conditions, and now they can brag about their training as much as they want. The guy started yelling about posing double biceps in the front, and all the disciples immediately began to follow his order and show off their biceps. The man did not understand what was happening and what they were trying to do. The guy blushed a little and explained that bodybuilding is one of the concepts that lie within the concept of training. But what the students did could be considered bodybuilding bragging. Leo started shouting that they had no time for jokes and that you didn't disobey his order right now. But in response, he was told what would happen, that they would get injured or die. It made him very angry because they could not train at all then. And the guy angrily asked if he would be responsible for the injured muscles. The man was very embarrassed and not sure he understood what he was saying. But he felt that he had to apologize to Harden for the words and actions he had taken. And then the Count began to apologize for what he had just said, and he sincerely apologized. Then he ordered his men to leave, and he was going to do it to them. The guy turned to his students and said that they had had a good rest, so they were starting again. The guy decided to ask if he could try to ask them again, but the boss said it was not worth it because it was a bad idea to begin with. Then he ordered him to call Commander Oliver to him, because although his character was smooth, his talent was only slightly inferior to Amalia's commander. He also ordered to send all military forces to the fortified gate. And I wanted them all to show the superiority of zombie people. A large number of zombies gathered near the county and stood in front of the gate. The man started shouting a lot, and said that he had been informed that the leader had such intelligence. That's why I decided to talk first, rather than start with a battle. Below came two monsters, Benjamin and another creature. Then the guy asked what he wanted to say to them that would bother them so much. He explained that although they have a large army, their soldiers are well trained, and they are protected by fortified walls that are not an easy task to overcome. He introduced himself as a representative of the Count, and wanted to challenge the monsters to a duel that would determine the outcome of the battle. Benjamin was very much amused by this, and said that he was ready to accept the offer because he thought it would be fun. The man looked at him angrily and began to smile, showing his large teeth. Smoke was coming out of his mouth, and he asked sternly who would be their representative. And then a giant monster came forward and began to growl so no one understood it. When he looked at his body composition, he said that it was great. He wanted to see how good his abilities were, and how well his body matched his structure. And they clashed in battle, the monster trying to restrain his attack. He appreciated its hardness, so he tried to swing his sword. When it wanted to attack, the man dodged it and was satisfied with what he had done, because he was convinced of his thoughts. He wondered how the guy managed to create such a body, because he had never seen an undead with such a complete set before. The monster spoke words of danger and strength, realizing that the enemy outnumbered him. He started running away from him, and Oliver started shouting after him. Because you can't run away like that, because it will only end when one of them dies. As he approached him, his fate was decided, and the monster looked at him and asked questions. Then Leo started shouting, warning of the danger. The man waved his sword and replied that he could not interrupt the sacred duel. After that, the guy bent down to him, transforming his arm several times, and struck him hard. Benjamin laughed at his words about the sacred duel. I asked him if he was interested in why he had agreed to it in the first place. Because he was the only one in this country who could pose a danger and was an obstacle to them. He added that he could not even imagine that their goal was to lure him out and go into battle himself. And it seemed that it was no coincidence that he was called Oliver, because he believed that he had the brains of a bull. Everyone was shocked when they saw what kind of blow he was dealt. The man was lying on the ground covered in blood and begged them for forgiveness and mercy. While the monster was beating him, Benjamin thought about it and said that of course he would pardon him. Over time, his creation carried Oliver's barely living body in its arms. Then he threw it up, and the rest of the zombies wanted it badly, so they waited for him to approach. Leo was disappointed and thought it was a disaster for him, because even Commander Oliver lost to them. Then Benjamin offered the Count to surrender and leave the castle, and on this condition he was ready to pardon him. Although he was embarrassed, he was not going to hand over the county to someone who had nothing human left in him. At the time, he regarded it as a renegotiation of the deal and admitted that he had no intention of letting him live. His face became serious and he pointed to the gate and ordered the zombies to enter. Leo began to worry a lot and ordered his rays to shoot arrows, but they admitted that they never put up honest ones anymore and don't know how to do it. It was very disturbing and he did not know what to do next when the guy asked him this. He screamed in terror and began to run away in a panic, away from them. The silhouettes began to mock him and say that their Count was a coward. The man told Ward that only cowards escape, and only they are capable of such an act. A young girl appeared in front of him and told him that he was a real coward, and that all his problems were because of that. He was asked if running away was a good and worthy thing for him to do, because if he ran after him, he could be in a safe place. The blonde girl cried when they started to take her away and asked him to save her. He wanted all those voices to stop because he didn't want to run away himself, and he thinks it's terrible, and he hates doing it. They could not even imagine how difficult the words about responsibility are, because they have never been in his shoes. because even a commander like him had people he wanted to protect. He ran to the training of the hooters and students and opened the gate to this area. He apologized to the boy and the others for not taking into account their abilities and for humiliating them. The man was ready even to die, but he asked for the soldiers who saved his people and country. Then he got down on his knees and began to bow, asking them for help, not thinking how he was humiliated. The guy asked if there were other ways to say that he wanted to coach. He started to warm up and said that his life was useless. The others started warming up behind him, and he said that they would have to answer for the training. Others wanted to join the young man and fight with him in acidifying their territory. And Harden was angry and said that there was no place for newcomers there. It was one of his principles. His disciples said that those who have less than 403 pedias cannot go. Samuel said that they are not allowed to participate in wars. He realized that they were poorly organized and was not happy about it. When he saw their backs, he didn't understand why the view from behind looked so attractive. As they ran through the city, they saw that they could quickly reach the gate along that road. And since the situation was difficult, they wanted to start interval training. The guys all sped up and had to maintain this pace for 1 minute and 30 seconds. It was very difficult for the old lord. He was amazed at how fast they were. The mother was holding her child close to her, protecting him from the approaching zombies. Then the goody builders came out of the blue, and doing the press, they struck the enemy. The boy told his mother that everything was fine now, and that those monsters had saved them. Then the family watched them go on and do their exercises. He looked at them and wondered if he could become as strong as they were, if he could learn to wield a sword. But she realized that this was not the art of the sword, because she saw what it really was. She suggested that her son come to them and learn this martial art when the war is over. Many zombies had already broken through into the county, and there was a fight going on everywhere. Harden was a little surprised, wondering why they were attacking and growling, even suggesting that they didn't have enough vitamins. Finally, the old lord arrived, and he was all wet from such a hard run and wanted to tell him something to answer his questions. He said that these people were called zombies, but it was difficult to continue talking, and he was reproached for keeping his back straight while resting. After he came to his senses, he explained that they had no minds, only hunger, and that they could be called walking corpses. Harden put out his hand and the energy began to condense, and he realized that he didn't have to feel guilty. The Lord came closer to him and asked what he was going to do next. He saw them all gathering at the county gate. So, to begin with, he suggested pushing them away with the strength of his pectoral muscles. He started to get angry at the old lord's expression, and he immediately apologized and said it was a great plan. The guy started laughing and was asked if the Lord could take over the operation. And since there were no questions, he made a crazy expression on his face as if he was up to something. He ordered everyone to disperse and sent the first and second groups to deploy around the neighborhood to protect the locals, and the third and fourth groups had to climb the walls and climb them. He ordered us to help human soldiers fight them. The old lord asked the fifth group to help Harden push the zombies out of the county. He was even a little surprised, because the guy was doing well, and someone shouted to close the main gate, which caused him a bit of confusion. Even though the guy pushed them back, if there was even a small gap and they advanced, there would be a danger to the residents. And so he loudly and a little anxiously ordered the gates to be closed. But he was told that the main gate had already been destroyed and there were no other gates that could prevent them from entering. Samuel said that he and his fellow goody builders brought a giant kettlebell. He was surprised and wondered if he was the swordsman from Amalia's group, and that they said he was talentless. The guy was shocked and did not understand how they were carrying them. It was hard for them to keep going, and one of the goody builders told Sam to go first. He was holding the kettlebell with his last bit of strength and didn't know what happened while he was busy. His large thigh muscle was worn out, and therefore he could no longer even walk. But Sir said they had to hold on and began to encourage them. Ghoul understood his feelings when he thought about the fatigue of his comrades. But he explained that if you exceed your training level, you can get injured. And if he gets it, he won't be able to train tomorrow. He fell to his knees and began to lean forward, asking the guy to leave him alone and go forward. But that wasn't the point, as the weight weighed a lot, and Sam didn't know how to get the rest of the weights without him. At first my vision was a little blurry, but then it became easier, and I could clearly see Harden trying to push the zombies away. He saw that an old lord was standing off to the side and helping them. The lord started shouting for the fifth group to join the kettlebell group and help them. They started running because their task was to close the gate with this thing. The guys ran and believed in themselves and their friends, and they had a very short distance to go. Finally, they were able to close the gate, and a couple of people were outside the county. Harden praised them for their careful handling of the kettlebell. The old lord was also happy that they were able to close the hole in the wall fortifications. Everyone raised their thumbs up and announced that the fifth group was resting. He said that all the groups except the first and second were going to push back the zombies instead of the coach. As soon as they heard this, they rushed from their seats and arrived at Harden. They went up to the zombies and watched how to do it correctly. The guy looked at it and told them to tighten their pectoral muscles more. The guy from the tower started shouting and warning them not to let themselves be bitten. Otherwise, they will become undead like them. And after these words, one goody builder was bitten by a zombie and started screaming in pain. His friend asked him not to pretend that he was infected and not to shed the snot, because it was a snot itself. They were having so much fun downstairs fighting them that the guy started to envy them. The zombie tried to bite the guy, but only broke his teeth. He hit him hard because of his prank and told him not to touch his muscles. Benjamin watched all this, but he didn't know who this guy was or what he was capable of. He assumed that he was a foreign monster or a ghoul, but did not understand why he was helping people. He grabbed his face, because this scenario was changing all his plans that he had made before. He pointed at the guy and ordered his subjects to attack him. The warrior jumped and headed for the monster to take revenge for the commanders. The count first told the boy to move away, and then turned to Harden and wanted him to look over there. He pointed to the guy and said that he did it all and attacked them. While the guy was holding back the zombies, he could not see the person who started it all. He told them to go straight ahead, because there would be a blue-haired man sitting there. Then he turned to the student and asked if they could manage on their own, and they said they could do it. And he started doing a reverse breathing exercise to clear his way from the zombies. The man looked at him and was amazed at his abilities. He called it a miracle. He quickly cleared the passage and a miracle happened before their eyes. He chewed on his nails because he was still a little nervous about his next steps, but he still considered them all selfless. I asked Elsa what she thought about everything that happened on the battlefield. He got up and didn't want to interfere as if there was a new variable. But at that time, a silhouette emerged from the smoke, and Harden came out and headed toward him. They became very similar in body structure and clasped hands in confrontation. Benjamin was angry and asked why he was standing in his way. Then the guy realized who was torturing the guys he was going to help train. He pushed him to the ground and asked him menacingly if he was going to be crushed, or if he was going to be crushed even more. Harden squeezed his throat so hard that he wondered where the strength came from. He wanted to be released, but the guy didn't even think about it and asked if that was all he could do. He started to cause him more pain with the climbing exercise again. Everyone was watching what was happening, and was shocked at how strong and brave he was. Suddenly, Ryan and Hugo appeared and began to fight the monster. Although Elsa didn't show any bright emotions, she was scared and told Ben that it was dangerous. The girl turned into a spider with very sharp paws and said she would destroy the source of danger. And she ran into this girl who blocked her attack. Elsa did not know who she was, so she decided to ask. The girl said she was Aunt Amelia's niece and her name was Rachel. While she was detained, she ordered her dog to run to Benjamin and help him. The young girl asked if she really thought she could defeat her with her miserable swordsmanship. When she rushed into the attack, she was convinced of her abilities and believed that she would succeed. At that time, the old lord was in command of the goody builders, and they made a slingshot and prepared a slingshot that was several times heavier. And when he ordered me to let go, the stone flew up. The stone broke in the air and its particles began to fall to the ground, creating a fire throughout the area. After that, he ordered to charge again, and the gulls actively and obediently followed his instructions. Then I didn't tell the first group to check if there were any more zombies in the settlement. And the second group was ordered to fill in all the holes in the main gate and start repairing it immediately. The third and fourth groups had to stop pushing back the zombies and kill them in hand-to-hand combat. He was surprised by Harden's strength, but the art that the old lord was mastering was amazing. It's like a terrifying ability that he towers over the battlefield and watches over everyone. Once he heard that among monsters, there are those who take the side of humans and then become the hero of legends. The hero of the Fourth Great Demon War was the legendary genius Uwadragan. Looking at the old lord, he did not understand why this name came to his mind. Benjamin's arm became like a mace, and he wanted to pierce his abs with it. But he was angry because he couldn't do it. And then the dog started barking. Bonado is the name given to a Doberman who mixes necromancy with wind magic and creates high-level techniques. The bones that fly inside the bonade are as strong as steel, so they can easily take off the head of a person without a metal helmet. But this way, it could not have done any harm to the boy. Then he started to whine, but when he was praised, his mood immediately lifted. He said that the point was that it just hurt. So I didn't want to use this method, but I had to, and I stuck the syringes into my body with liquid. Well, whatever happens from now on is all his doing. At first, the guy was a little upset that he was getting stronger, but he was sure that he could not surpass the strength of his arms. Harden grabbed the enemy by the throat and asked him if he thought so. The trainer felt that the muscles of the sternum were too thick and that he could not grip. And because of this, he was hit so hard that he flew into the air from this attack. He provoked him and laughed so much that you couldn't even follow him with your eyes. It all depended on the fibers attaching the muscles to the bones, because you can separate the white and red muscles, and he didn't want anyone to step in to replace Amalia. Red muscles play an important role in getting air, so they contain more myoglobin, which colors them. And Ben wanted to know why he decided to get involved. Due to the effect of myoglobin, fatigue sets in more slowly, but in return, muscle contraction is not fast, and Harden held back attacks with a wide stance. Then I asked, what about the white muscles that are there? Unlike red muscles, white muscles contain a low amount of this substance, and therefore, fatigue accumulates faster, and his opponent seemed to be unaffected by the damage. And because the attacks were not working, he wanted to hit harder. But on the other hand, the contraction rate of those muscles is much higher, and at that moment, Ben struck harder, thus causing him pain. Therefore, the best way to win this battle is to withstand the enemy's attacks. He decided to pose and showed his pectoral muscles from the side and waited for him to catch his breath. Looking at the way he moves, one could say in a word that this is a battle of endurance. But at the time, the boy did not know that Benjamin's body was created unnaturally. He used a press, and they began to resist each other, and a great powerful energy grew between them. The guy could not understand what kind of power such a guy had. So I decided to jump to the top and break away from him. Ben realized that he should have avoided a violent confrontation with Harden, as he would not be able to resist him for long. The young man realized that he had excellent muscle mass, but he certainly could not have thought that control was the most important thing in the power systems. Showing his body, he said that he himself was unaccustomed to such a body that changes at a high rate. I couldn't wait until this fast guy finally ran out of steam. At the time, Ryan and Hugo continued to fight the giant monster. The monster was furious and said hard that those guys were weaklings. Ryan was walking with his sword and said that they knew they were weaker than him, but the strength of their friendship was much greater than his. Hugo ran after his friend to attack the monster, using his battle energy with great effort. His friend passed between his legs because he could not stop due to inertia, and the sword stopped very close to the guy's face. Even if he turned around, I don't understand where he went, but I saw many other creatures. The guy was getting up from the ground, and I realized that he was a heavy guy. He looked at the monster's motionless body and thought that now he could join the goody builders. The settlement was located on the outskirts, and the warrior who arrived there called for the commander, Amalia. She was sitting at dinner and asked what happened. How did he come to barge into a room where a weak girl was sitting alone? She wanted to make a joke and began to speak very slowly. But her husband interrupted her and said that they had no time for such jokes, adding that something terrible had happened in the county. After that, she realized everything and asked him to take a breath and tell her what had happened there, and he told her that zombies had attacked the county. He was very scared and said he needed her help. She continued to eat and laughed at this, not understanding it, but feeling that the army could handle them completely. The girl stopped eating as soon as she was told that the zombie's head was filled with Benjamin. Her husband was very anxious, and when she started laughing, he said that this was not the time to do it now. She explained that she would have no other time like now, so she thought how unlucky he was. Amalia said that there are only 2 shields in the county now. The first shield was a reliable ally named Harden, she thought. The second was her favorite niece, who fought very well and proved herself during the battle with Elsa. This girl was a major star on this continent. It was a dark time on a continent where there was an endless war between all kinds of creatures, and also for the sake of the elves, who were oppressed because of their weakness and dislike of activity and disputes. The human doctor, Charles DeWalt, invented and disseminated a method of training and meditation for elves. Nowadays, laques have gone beyond sports and are used as a fighting technique for elves. Rachel used to live in the forest of elves and learned some interesting and self-serving things there. She studied the elven latte and used it in this battle. In just 7 years, she learned this martial art and demonstrated exercises such as breaststroke and toe stroke, and she completely mastered them. Elsa watched as the girl ducked up and said that there was no way to dodge in the air. She threatened it with the fact that she would stop its existence. When she made a couple of rollbacks, the guard went down and grabbed the girl's sharp object with her socks. When she recorded it, she said that Elsa was no match for her, and the girl was angry and said that this was not the end. After that, Rachel continued to strike without interrupting her attack, and she asked if it was better to sit her down like she had done with her. She was very angry about this, and said that she does not take advice from her enemies. Eliza was told that her movements were very similar to those used by her aunt, but as far as she was concerned, she didn't have enough of them. And when her aunt drank, she felt that someone was talking about her and remembering her. She hovered over the girl and told her that the enemies had to die, and she was able to use her training room combat energy to hold her back. I asked her what she would do now, because she has so many hands that it seems like it would be harder to keep her balance. Holding her sword, she offered to end it all at last. At that time, Harden no longer understood what was happening, as he should have been tired by now. But he wasn't. He assumed that there must be a huge difference between their strengths. One wondered why he wasn't tired yet, and the other why there was no such difference. Benjamin flew at the guy and asked when he would finally pass out, but he defended himself and said that he would like to find out from him. Ben explained that he created this substance to outdo Amalia. Therefore, she gave him strength comparable to that of a dragon. It was hard for him a little bit, but he said that something seemed to be studying more hard than he was. Then he wondered if the side effects had already begun. After that, he ducked back and had to immediately take a neutralizer. Harden asked if he was trying to change his appearance to provoke him somehow. He saw how sick he was and assumed that it was an imbalance of nutrients and thought he had gout. His skin color began to change. He asked her to give him an injection as soon as possible, but then he did not understand why he was fighting it at all. He began to apologize and held his head, after which he asked them to stop fighting. He explained that wasting your life fighting is a waste of time in such a beautiful world. The guy started warming up and said he didn't want to fight either. Benjamin grabbed his head and started crying when he was told that he had started it all. He was very angry with Harden and asked if he even knew how many of the younger guys would no longer be able to sign up for training because of him. He apologized and admitted his mistake, but he didn't understand why he had done it in the first place. You didn't want the guy to look at him with such a scary face. Then he started crying and said that he was doing it all to save Elsa. He told me that she had died a long time ago and was tied to a tree. The guy was holding an injection in his hand and started laughing, explaining that he was here for revenge. The problem with this substance was that it was very painful and turned the head into a pumpkin. He laughed at the fact that he had almost forgiven everyone, even as he did, and injected it into himself. And this time, even before the side effects appeared, he threatened to deal with it completely. 32 years ago, they were on the training ground and Ben asked Leo if he knew why their people had so little mana. He was paid or not, because he didn't even know that he had to know such details. Benjamin wanted him to listen to it because the boy is a future descendant of the game. He kept hitting the pair and said that even if I said he wouldn't listen, he would still tell me. Then I stopped for a minute and decided to listen to him, and you instructed him to speak. The guy told me that unlike the combat energy of mana, it is quite subtle. So when it is established, it circulates in the afternoon, and the more emotions pass through a person. But in their county, all the people strictly followed discipline, and they also paid a lot of attention to other people's views and suppressed their emotions. Therefore, because of this, it cannot circulate freely in my body, and this makes it impossible to have a large supply of it. The guy said that they didn't need to leave it for the witch, because they were more interested in combat energy based on internal surveillance and the nature of citizens. Ben began to joke that he smelled something unpleasant. He was ordered to give up his useless magical research and instead spar with them for the first time in a long time. The guy got excited and said they would warm up for it. After their battle, it turned out that there were 123 against 43, the boy said, pointing a stick at the lying Ben. They were distracted when they saw a girl. It was Amalia's mentor. She asked if he always cleans his back so badly because he is very talented and he does this. He explained that he was just not interested in fencing, but Amalia said that he hadn't become a master yet, so he didn't know how much fun it was, and she asked him to follow Erdo's example because he always enjoys every training session. But he wasn't having much fun training either, and he looked upset. Someone told the mentor that he simply had no talent. Benjamin then asked what she had just said, and Leo wondered who she was. The girl said that she had come there for her sake, but forgot to introduce herself right away. Today their opponent in sparring was her special student Elsa. She laughed that even if they attacked together, she would scatter them with one blow. They were angry about this, and Leo said that he would not tolerate it. She attacked them for calling her an impudent girl. They were lying on the ground and were pleased and amazed by such strength and promised not to say naughty girl anymore from that day on. At the time, Leo thought that Elsa was not like most of the nobility, and did not know whether she could be called pure enchantment. He remembered how she laughed and noticed that Elsa had a beautiful face. While they were lying there, Benjamin had a dream, and his friend wondered what it was. He said that he would marry Elsa, which shocked Leo. This surprised him a bit, and he asked why he was so scared. He explained that the girl liked strong guys, and asked if he could handle such a guy. Benjamin was very cheerful, and said he would be practicing from then on. Each time he showed better and better results, and eventually managed to defeat Leo. The guy was tired and confused. He didn't understand why he couldn't win. Elsa asked if the boy would fight again. The guy was a little confused and said that he was busy with Count's affairs. Someone was angry because they sent him to fencing and accused him of not being able to defeat a weakling. Leo said he didn't seem to have any talent for fencing. The man threw a cup of wine at him and said he didn't want to hear anything like that. Leonard Wardo said that the young man was the only son of a descendant, and he was talentless. He was upset and apologized to his father. Leo was sitting in the rain, and was told that if it continued like this, he would catch a cold. But the guy said that everything was fine, and he could go. But I was shocked that it was Elsa who saw that all was not well here. She asked him if he really thought that when he said everything was fine with such mourning, and everything was fine. Elsa began to pull him and asked him to follow her, because she did not know how to live. He did not understand how that girl could always smile. He even allowed himself to assume that she was smiling like that because meeting him made her happy. And I started thinking that she might not like Benjamin, but he did. I immediately felt better because I thought I could love her more than anyone else in this world. The boy overheard some people talking about how Ben had confessed his love to Elsa. But Elsa had rejected him, and they were also surprised because they thought they had already met. He was excited about this and assumed that he had a chance. And he ran off joyfully somewhere thinking that Elsa had feelings for him. He thought he liked her, but then he changed his mind and said he loved her. Even as if his father would be against it, and he even agreed as if the family would abandon him. Leo ran home and caught his breath and promised to look only at him and promised to make her happy. He was very nervous before looking out the window, and when he dared to see the terrible picture, he became angry and disappointed in the girl. The guy ran after her and asked why she refused him, because she had said before that she had feelings. She used to say that she liked guys who were stronger than her, so Ben practiced fencing and often won. The guy looked very worried and asked her not to say that, but to think again. Then the girl began to say that since childhood her body had been filled with mana, but if there was not too much mana, it would destroy its physical shell. And for this reason, from time to time it needs to release some of the mana. She explained that she was doing it to open the world to people's eyes, but that one day someone would definitely notice. Elsa laughed, because she was not yet ready to make her dear man an accomplice in this. The guy suddenly hugged her, and she was so surprised that she froze in place. The girl asked him what he was doing, because if they didn't let him go, the magic would get into his body. Benjamin seriously said that he was the only one in Wardo County who studies mana. He hugged her and said that from now on, he was the only one who could solve her problem. And he vowed to live the rest of his life loving her endlessly. Leo followed her and watched her change her mana from time to time. For a while they had a carefree life, having fun and living together in harmony. And the guy who loved her suffered and cried to her husband. The girl was beautiful and in a good mood. But when she turned around, her hand was covered in blood and so were the walls. Ben started to worry a lot and asked if she was okay. She explained that everything was fine, because she had recently had a sudden increase in mana, and since then, it had happened often. He was very worried about her, and she could not even imagine how his heart froze when she fainted. The fact that he did not leave the lab for a second seemed to indicate that the time had come for him to fulfill his promise. He still had enough of his own, and he really wanted her to wait for him until he returned, and it wouldn't take long, because he had found an element that would enhance his physical characteristics. He begged me to take pity on him and let me help him cure her so that he could love her all his life until his death. A guy came to see her, and he was so drunk that she was getting sick of him, and he wanted to ask her if she ever loved him. He claimed that they were very good together and happy, but the girl said that she had no feelings for him as a man, and apologized as if he had misunderstood her. Her hand began to glow, and she could even imagine that this could have happened, that she loved him. She asked him if he would love her completely, if she had to use mana and be a criminal. She was very surprised to learn that he pretended not to know, even though he was aware of her situation. He explained that he wasn't brave enough to rebel against his father back then, but that things have changed now. Leo was very disappointed and thought that he was still scared, and Elsa stood there and asked him to forgive her. People were outside the Count's palace with torches and ordered him to come out and make it rain. The man turned to his son and said that these are the people they call the masses. He explained that he was not your god, that he was not a god, that it would be good if he went away. And then Leo asked himself what he should do in such a situation. The man watched him and asked his son if he thought they hated him. He explained that they just needed someone to take their anger out on and someone to blame for their actions. He told me that I was someone who was going to use this object to take out his anger instead. The guy wanted to know who it would be, and he said it would be Elsa, to whom he had declared his love. The father thanked him, because who would have thought that one day the day would come when his short son would help him? Because if he hadn't come to take him away, he would have known that they had a witch in the county. The guy was shocked and said that you can't do that to someone to whom his son has tender feelings. My father slapped him and asked him how someone who was supposed to be in charge of the country could give in to his feelings and wanted to leave him alone, because he was sure he wouldn't do anything stupid. Then he ordered the burial attendants to go and lock his son in his own room. Leo ran away from his room and asked his father for forgiveness, because even if it was his will, he could not obey it this time. Even though he couldn't win that girl, he still doesn't have the courage to watch her die. He finally found her when the guards were taking her away and leading her somewhere. The girl was very scared and asked him to help her. The people were also alarmed when they saw young Wardo and thought he was an ally of the witch. They began to say that even though he was the son of a count, if he was an ally of the witch, he should also be sent to death. and everyone supported the man's words. Then the guy ran away, and the girl was tied to a post and watched her beloved being tortured. He was desperate and held his beloved on his knees, and because of this, Benjamin lost his arm. Ben was running and screaming, but Harden got in his way and was very angry with him because he was preventing him from taking revenge. He used both hands to do a push-up and pushed the monster away from him. Suddenly, his arms became noticeably lighter and he wanted to do the bench press again. Benjamin would get up and shout Elsa's name and then get hit again by the enemy. Vic screamed to be let go, but the guy only pressed him harder into the ground. Then he performed the pullover exercise and again struck him hard on the head. After his long training session, Harden's arm was completely covered in blood. After he finished with him, he wanted to go and deal with the rest of the zombies. He was very angry with the dog Bonado, who skillfully carried out his master's orders. Harden saw Ben go upstairs and thought he had decided to take the rest of his family. The girl also agreed to let him take them because she was not interested in the losers. The Count was of the opposite opinion and said that it was impossible to let Ben go so easily. He shouted that he would return later to take revenge and ordered them to follow him and kill him. But Rachel wasn't going to do that. On the contrary, she started running at him, saying that he was finished. He was a little surprised and asked why he thought she was running to him. The girl was very angry and asked him what he had done to her aunt. The man was very frightened and started running away, ordering him to grab Rachel. The guy was getting annoyed that he was running away again. Ryan and Hugo stood in front of her, blocking the way with their swords and advising her that it was better to stop. But the girl ran confidently and said that they would not stop her. Even though they were aware of this, they said that sometimes you have to go all the way and set up for an attack. She jumped on the sword, straightening her back through the C shape, and then she made a leap upstairs and found herself on the windowsill where the Count was standing. The warrior swung his sword and said that he would not give the Count lunch. Rachel hit him on the head and moved on, dodging Sam, who tried to stop her. She said that he used to be pretty good looking, but now he's also tightened up his body. She asked with a surprised face if she had ever fallen for his slow attacks. Looking at his arm, he thought he had become stronger. Rachel was aggressive and said that he would be responsible for the attack and the ruin of their family. She told him not to apologize because she didn't need it, but to just die. The man was very frightened and shouted that she was throwing a sword at him while he held her by the leg. He did the pullover exercise 10 times, throwing it up and down, then to the ground. He realized that he had just fought a strong opponent and had not distributed his strength correctly. At the end of the exercise, he hoped that she hadn't died there yet. Leo said that their soldiers were strong and should not have died. Rachel woke up in a room and was alarmed, not realizing where she was. The boy said that she was in an inn inside the Wardo fortress, and that Mr. Harden had asked him to take good care of her. She wanted him to tell her where the Count was, but assumed that he wouldn't. He smiled and told me that he and the Lord were engaged in so-called training, and offered to go there together. She was surprised that the guy was willing to take her there. Rachel asked if this was true, and if he was not deceiving her, because she did not understand who would train in a city like this. She thought he couldn't possibly lead a potential murderer to the Count. But then the young man showed her upstairs that Harden was there. She was surprised that he really brought her even more as they practiced an exercise called the Santa Claus Harnessed Gait. He was inspired by the man's screams and began to develop a new skill, coaching consciousness, which merged with the skill of composure. He asked whether he really needed to be killed, or whether he liked the exercise so much. After that, the epic passive skill of the psychopathic coach began to form. He was shocked and did not understand what kind of madness was going on. Then he turned to Rachel and said that she had promised to kill him. She started laughing at him, and other students followed them and practiced the same way. He said that all the important people had already gathered, and that the meeting could begin. The first point was in connection with Benjamin's invasion, and the important people in the county who died in battle because of it. Due to the lack of military power, according to the laws of wartime, they called the commander out of the force, and she refused because of some personal important matters. I asked him what he would do with the vacancies that arose for that reason. Leo wanted to honor Ryan and Hugo as heroes of this battle, and asked the knights for their opinions. Others agreed that it was not a bad idea and sounded good too. The second point of the agenda was that citizens saw Harden's contribution to this battle, so they came to the training ground and did bodybuilding. And because of this, a new squad of bodybuilder swordsmen was created. He asked if everyone agreed that Mr. Goodybuilder would lead the training sessions where and for how long. Leo was very happy and said that of course everyone agreed, and that this was great news. I expressed my gratitude to him for standing up with them and defending the country from the enemy. The guy asked to wait and stood over the Count, looking at him. And the Count asked if he was not satisfied with something. Something flew very close to the man and he was very frightened, not realizing what was happening. Harden's aura was red and he was asked what he didn't like again. They told me to take the spear away because it would make him angrier. Harden smiled and asked if they also wanted to receive individual training from him. I asked him to cut his time and speak much faster to finish the meeting. The senior lord was very impressed and said he was beautiful. The man continued to read and said that the third paragraph was about Rachel. The fact that she attempted murder, but due to the circumstances in the country and her good intentions, the punishment will be lightened for her. And in this regard, an order was issued to deprive her of her citizenship in the county of Werdo. Leo began to speak and knew that the girl did not have good feelings for him. He gave her the right to kill him if she didn't like it. The man even asked her to kill him, but she refused to do so. Then he began to shout that such a talentless man as he had no right to be the head of the fortress and gave him the right to judge him. The guy smiled and asked if he was going to give up all his exercises and go in for sports. It sounded good, and the people started saying that the country would be given to them. And since it was, my husband wanted to try. And since the count had less fighting power, he wanted to try it, because it was an easy way to become a landowner. The guy said that he was begging for it because of the way he supports aspiring athletes in his country. He added that whoever becomes a count will help improve their fitness. Then how do you blame your mother for the fact that she gave birth to them? Not their father and not in the right family. She is his place. He fits in well himself. Then he said to tell the other punks, and at the same meeting he promised Harden to make all the necessary sports equipment. But he couldn't create all the simulators on his own, and he learns that the king spirit of the earth can help him. But the problem was that no one knew where to find him, and at that moment Rachel said that he was a friend with spirits. Because while I was learning latkis, I lived with elves and learned to communicate with spirits. The boy was very happy and grabbed her hands, asking her to take him to the king. It was not difficult for her, but in return, she wanted him to agree to join her revenge. He didn't understand a bit, because he was already letting Rachel kill him. But it wasn't him. It was for those who caused their family to fall, and it was a clan of black magicians. Benjamin said that too much went wrong, and he promised himself that he would not make any more such mistakes because he had already seen the results. His creatures laughed at him and said that they were disappointed in him. And another said that this is why origin is important. The dolls said that it was probably a good thing that Elsa was gone, making the boy more angry. And because of these words, Ben attacked them, and the monster stuck out his scythe. The girl was happy because she had finally found and spoken to Oculus. And in the cave, the battle was still going on and the doll was laughing very hard. You said he was getting angry. Then she decided that she would destroy Elsa, so Ben injected himself with more of the substance. She asked if such actions could be considered treason, and they laughed and called him a traitor. They went outside and the guy really betrayed them and hoped that someone who needed to know already knew. The doll asked what would happen to the boy's research diary. She thought that many people would be interested in it. Maybe someone would want to get it. The master said that this would not happen, because he would be the one to get it. And at that moment, Amalia attacked them with a piercing blade. They were shocked, and the girl saw how many shrubs had grown here. I got very angry and prepared a song of a rotten forest. She said that in their country, attention is paid to ancestors by pulling out the shrubbery on graves. You said that this custom has become moldy, but she still tries to follow it because she can't give it up. Rachel said that you can't cut the grass. It's not in the spirit, but it's clear that they are just clearing the road to make it easier for Harden to walk. He smiled and said that everything was fine, and that it was better to walk behind him in a walking lunge. He thought they were walking in the wrong direction and going in circles in one place. But the girl said that he waited a little bit because the path of spirits is different from the usual path. He touched the ground and said that it was quite soft, so it would be perfect for doing squats with lunges. While they were establishing a connection, he told them to do 20 of these squats. She could hear the singing and whispering of birds, the rustling of leaves, and all her senses became more alive. The trembling of a flower about to bloom and the path of the spirits. They agreed to shout at the end, but everyone heard Wardo scream. The guy smiled and told them to pull themselves together and do it 40 more times. They were shocked after he said that he hadn't heard that 60 times. After they repeated the number loudly, he was happy about it. Suddenly, a girl dragged him somewhere and asked him to give himself to the wind. She said that this is the spirit world where the spirits of the earth live, the world of Mother Gaia. Old Lore was amazed at this. But then he felt gravity pull him to the ground and they fell heavily into the sand. He felt that his body was too heavy and informed his coach about it. He saw good exercises everywhere and said it was a kind of home gym. He wanted to meet a guy named Brendan as soon as possible. The creatures were very aggressive and hit the ground, frightening the others, and the gulls began to run away. They saw their coach holding back his fist, and were surprised and asked if he was okay. Although he screamed in pain, he liked that he got up stronger. Sam started shouting for everyone to take cover, because it was the call of his mentor's muscles. He ordered the old lord to put on weight because he was used to it. The girl did not understand what he was doing, but his student explained that it was his foot day. She looked at him and didn't understand what kind of a day of legs he had. The guy explained that today he trains the lower body, including the legs, because his older comrades do not explain very well. They were shocked. It seemed that cheerful ants had made their way in. It was the voice of the master of the spirit world, Gaia, and his name was Brendan, who asked them what their purpose was. The boy became very big and went into the water to wash himself. The voice asked again why they had come here and disturbed him. I think it's even more important for muscles, because fluid intake is really important for muscle growth. Seawater contains a lot of sodium, so it's not very suitable for rehydration. And so it seemed like it wasn't the sea because the taste was soft and delicate. His students were very excited that it helps build muscle, so they all ran quickly into the water. After they had enjoyed themselves, the guy was ready to talk. The voice asked how they dared to drink water when Bernard himself was talking to them, and called them impudent and unscrupulous. Therefore, there was no point in talking to them, because they should learn good manners first. This place was like a living labyrinth, and without the help of the spirits it was impossible to know where the exit was. He added that here and there inside the labyrinth, golems would welcome them with open arms. Then he asked if they would be able to navigate the ever-changing maze, which contains many nudes, and get to him. The girl decided to jump up and he said that it was effective, and that he defied gravity, and she landed back down. She realized that gravity was too strong, so she couldn't fly through the air. They tried to push the walls, but they failed. And it was explained to them that this is a zone of earth spirits, a territory of gravity and minerals. And when he said that the wall could not be broken through, for the 12th time, a crack went through the wall. Sam was glad they were lucky that the wall was quite fragile. Then he turned to his older comrades to break down the wall using the crack made by Harden. They noticed that the wall was really well broken by the load. The question was how to deal with the main ones, which were several times bigger than them. And then Rachel came to the rescue and used her blade to smash the red dot in their head. She explained that, according to the legend of the spirits, the eyes of the golems are the core, because if they are destroyed, the energy will stop flowing. This angered the owner very much, and the volcano began to erupt. Then he realized that Bernard was looking at the bench. Like, to believe the words of the spirits, you have to pick up a thing to meet him. He wondered how to lift it, because it was unrealistically large. I thought that I could just break it, but the student said that there was a rope tied to it. 11 months have passed unnoticed since he entered this world from the earth. You could tell that he was very young, because he was 17 years old, and there was something strange hanging on the ceiling, a block. But I didn't understand what it was doing there. All this time he was hiding his longing for his family, and one day he met a thing from there. My eyes watered, but I still couldn't understand the image of the simulator, and it was for pulling the upper unit. The overhead bar deadlift is a sports machine invented in the 60s of the 20th century by American trainer Andrew Memel. He held onto the iron handles and pulled them toward him, and then realized that these movements were very similar to pulling the top block while lying down. After that, he felt the need to create a simulator so that this exercise could be performed more efficiently and safely. That's why there are a couple of types and designs of such a machine that are often used in gyms. Harden began to wipe his tears and told us what the simulator was for. The bodybuilders didn't understand what kind of upper block trainer it was. Leo was shouting that they were trapped in a bigger area. He smiled and said it didn't look like a trap. I asked them to tell me what exercises they have been doing for their backs for all this time. The student began to list, naming where and what exercises. He agreed, and they helped each other so that they could do pull-ups. But usually people don't have partners when they train. For such people to see the effect of pull-ups, they need the traction of the upper unit. The movement is similar to a pull-up, so they are almost equal. And you can also choose the weight on this machine, so everyone loved it. Among the muscles of the back, this exercise has gained on the scapularis muscles as well as the oblique muscles of the back. But how that concentration on the crashing bug can lead to training of the forearm or shoulder muscles. And since they had a simulator, I suggested that they also try it, following his example. And everyone was happy about it. Traction of the upper block for positions. First, you need to fix the position so that the body does not rise up. Second, come together so that the distance between your hands is slightly more than shoulder width, and fix your lower body on the bench. For the third time, put yourself in a core and lift yourself up with the oblique muscles of your back, not with your arms. And then the movement of the gaze should be directed perpendicular to the pipe. Fourthly, you need to make sure that your back does not bow at a large angle and that you do not use body resistance. But I thought it was too much weight for them, so I told them that they would try it later, but for now, to move forward. With one movement, the lid opened and they said they were moving forward. Leo asked if it was not his leg day, and if he could do his back then. The student laughed and said that his physical abilities were not quite the same as theirs. Then I asked when he would come in and assumed that he would probably come in after he finished his workout. He finished doing 4 sets and told the old lord that everything was ready. When everyone was holding the stove, they told Harden to go in first. The labyrinth started to burn. Some hamsters were climbing through the tunnels in a beautiful and coordinated way. The girl was fascinated by it. She liked it very much and thought it was cute. She wanted to touch them, thinking they would be soft and smooth. He said that before signing up for a gym, you should talk to the director, and not just touch everything out of a desire to work out. She attracted attention and said that she could not disagree that no one should be touched. A creature came out to them and said that he was the king of the spirits of the earth, Bernard. The old lord said that his stomach was like his own, but we were still surprised by it. The king was furious because they dared to compare him to the creatures of the middle world. Keith started laughing a lot because the situation was developing in a funny way that was hard for him to contain and watch. Because that dog's name was Robert, and he is one of the supreme spirits of the earth. And the real Bernard was a cat in a bathrobe who told us all about it. Thanks to Robert's research, they were able to assess their abilities. But he asked what brought them here. Harden asked if he could make them the kind of training equipment he wanted. Keith said that if he had the time and materials, he could create anything. And just as he was about to make a deal, Leo interrupted him and said that this was not the way to negotiate. He first introduced himself as the landowner of Wardo County and bowed. He asked them to tell him how they could pay him and to name him officially. He appreciated his politeness and began to think about paying. But they didn't need goods from their middle world, so they usually accept payment in something other than things. He said that whatever order the King of Spirits gave, he was ready to fulfill it. He told me that once someone appeared who was polluting their land. And it seemed that he was strong enough if everyone he sent with that message went missing. And if you do not, then the creatures will cleanse his land, and he will help them. Harden got excited, and Leo asked if they would have a guide. He explained that they used to send medium-level spirits, but now he wanted to see it for himself. Therefore, the spirit of you, of the same level as Robert, will go with them, and he was very shocked by this. After that, he said he was in charge and responsible for this place. The cat got angry and asked if he thought he didn't know that he slept all day and only came out for treats. And I shouted loudly to him to go there immediately. Amalia thought she was disturbing a whole hive of wasps. The creatures chased her and ordered her to capture her because she was Rachel's swordmaster. She ran and said that everything in the ecosystem was connected, because if you're not afraid of bees, you can just enjoy the honey and ask them if they know that. The girl tried to cope with all of them, inflicting terrible wounds on the enemies as there were many of them. She cut all the wasps with the combat energy of her piercing blades. They were shocked and did not want to believe that she was so strong. There were many corpses on the ground, and Amalia looked at them and felt sorry that she had come here for nothing. She thought about giving her student a few pointers. Robert said he could read the memories of the earth by eating just a piece of ore. The guy was very happy and asked if he was seeing something to react like that. The dog was very happy because it was very tasty for him. But he was joking, because this redhead was quite young, so her memories are short. He asked me to bring him stones that were many years old, because they would be of more use. They started searching, and they didn't understand whether they should bring boulders there. They saw a strange man, and when he came over, they were a little scared, and he asked what they were doing. Ghoul was surprised, because they thought that this stone was needed, and wanted to dig it up to make it easier to take it. The guy took hold of a stone with one hand and it cracked from his strength. He made a pen and showed me that now I could hold it more comfortably. And it was an exercise of lifting the top with one hand as a weight. Sam walked up to the stone and asked if they were talking about this jerk lift. It was a jerk lift, a balance of jerk plus overhead squats. His coach praised him and said that his posture was much better and that he had improved his technique. He smiled because he was pleased to hear such words from his mentor and said that it was completely easier for him than before. Everyone saw how the others were training and thought they had already forgotten about his instructions. He began to see somebody saying that this poison was the most worthy of names. The most valuable gift that the gods could give to people was alcohol, as the human frog Carl said. And in exchange for this one, which would give him this place, he was ordered to join the Oculus and asked if he heard it well. And he was angry that some reptile started making jokes in response to his kindness. The frog said that he was not a reptile but an amphibian, and that he did not mind joining Oculus, but he did not like the conditions. They started pouring alcohol into him because they ordered him to get drunk properly. A lot of liquid was poured into him, and he thought he was on fire. And now he could see the readiness to negotiate on his face. The frog smoked and said that they had a lot of different kinds of booze. And after that, they wanted to start the meeting with other amphibians joining him. He said that he had finally found it, but no one seemed to listen to him, because the others continued to study. Ghoul told his friend that his oblique muscles had recently grown noticeably larger, but he just has muscles that take shape quickly, and he saw that he was lifting more weight, because weight is the perfect way to build muscle, and he laughed about it. But his friend asked him to wait, because he could not let such words pass him by, because action is more important than weight. But he did not want to agree and asked what it was talking about. And they started with the question of whether weight is more important or what works for them. Then one of them offered to fight me if I kept insisting on it, and he was already warming up, so I wanted to suggest it too. The other students saw them fighting and said that the weight was counteracting their chest muscles. If you look at the side of the facet, the muscles are larger on the side of the weight, but on the side of the action, the balance and symmetry are more ideal than on the side of the weight. Then she started doing the first pose, double biceps front. The second pose was broad back muscles in the front, and they were just about to move on to the third pose when the coach came up and asked what they were doing. He was a little angry and asked if they had already pumped all the abs. But he started yelling at them for arguing over the rules on his strength to train and then rest rather than think about it. But they were wondering what was more important, the weight or the action that affected them. And again, they started with a bang in front of the coach, shouting their position. Then he asked what was more important, dumbbells or barbells, and they didn't understand. After that, the comparison with the posterior or anterior thigh muscles is made, waiting for an answer to which is more important. Then he started screaming again and asked what was more important, chest or back muscles. Leo then realized what he was trying to say, but I think that people usually compare it to mom and dad. The old lord told him to be quiet because Harden has very good hearing. He approached the student who was distraught and told him that he should not think of it as something difficult and complicated, because you can only feel the effect of exercise by lifting weights. On that day, the companions felt everything with their bodies once again after doing everything, and he said that they would reset all the training they had done until then and start over. While they were enjoying this, Robert continued to eat the ore and asked if they were not going to fulfill their duties. Rachel was shocked and asked if she had ever used such a slow attack. Sam walked through the woods and remembered what his trainer had told him, that if he wanted to get stronger, he needed to strengthen his accessory muscles. Then he found what he was looking for and wanted to use the slime to make a ribbon. He bent up and spread his arms, then tried to catch it by crossing them. But I saw that some frog had grabbed it and said that it made very good alcohol. He wondered what a human being was, since he wasn't even a mage. The guy said that it could help him become stronger, and he probably didn't know it. When Carl found out that he wanted to get stronger, he said that their main man was a professional in this. He invited him to go with him, because he would introduce him to the main man. He added that he already had a mentor, but still went with the frog. The guy drank a lot, the frog said a whole barrel of booze, and it seemed that he drank a lot in his normal life. But this was the first time. He was red in the face after such an effect of alcohol, and asked when he would be stronger. Carl assured me that he was already getting stronger, because alcohol was making him that way. She kept pouring him more, but he couldn't take it anymore. Carl told the guest that he would have to pay him dearly for the drink. He was in a strange place. He had a headache and was very thirsty. He was tied up and felt that it was very sticky and springy, that he could not get out. Someone advised him not to fight, because it was a futile exercise. He was told that he was in a frog food warehouse, that frog poison was in the air, and that he would not be able to leave on his own. He started shouting comments and said he didn't ignore him, but he immediately started laughing because they were going to die soon, so there was no point in getting angry. The guy wanted to ask him where he was, so he apologized and asked why they hadn't been killed immediately. He explained that it was all about creating a dungeon. The dungeon is a land of darkness from which monsters appear endlessly. But in reality, monsters cannot be created endlessly. Using energy derived from living creatures is the main principle of the dungeon. In other words, we can say that the most important thing for a dungeon is to create and preserve an energy-storing core. Therefore, these amphibious creatures fill their warehouses with living creatures, and they turn into energy and become part of the dungeon. Samuel asked if there really was no way to get out of here. He pointed at the skeleton and said that it looked like there was 0 probability. That's why I told him not to move, because the more he moves, the faster the energy is sucked out of him. He was very upset because he was very weak as a person who found himself in such a situation, and had already asked everyone for forgiveness. The lizard started to get angry when he heard the name Harden, and asked if he meant the same Lord Goulet from Ali's mine. The guy said he was talking about him and asked how he knew him. After that, he started to panic and said that he had to get out of here as soon as possible, and he had to leave. I really don't understand what he's doing, because he just said that you can die faster this way. He recalled their first meeting and how he mocked him. That's why he said it was better to wash it right then and there. The coach noticed that his student had disappeared and was not showing up. The old lord asked if he had brought a ribbon with him, so he went to hunt for a slug. He was surprised, because he could tell him, because he always carries a spare. The girl was also worried, because it was not surprising that he had not returned yet. But the coach assured me that everything would be fine, because he was not so weak that he could not defend himself. Leo said that I have an enemy in my country, and I don't think it's right to be so calm. Then the guy offered him to do 100 sit-ups as if he didn't like peace. Robert started running towards them and said that their target was a frogman named Carl, that he was going to make this place a dungeon. That's why he said that he would not use force on this territory, as it might help him. He immediately thought that frog legs already contain a lot of protein, and that this must be useful for muscle growth. His disciples shouted again and asked if it was really useful. And everyone started looking at the dog, asking where this Bilochok was. But he didn't know Winter. His place is somewhere like a cave. They suggested that we split into groups and send a signal with our pectoral muscles when we are not walking. But the coach didn't really want to do aerobic exercises. Leo started laughing and assured him that he was a master searcher, so he asked him to trust him. The guy asked if he had already done all the 100 sit-ups, but because he didn't do it, the coach said he would send it after he was done, and it was very disappointing for him. A frog came, and they started pouring something out of the bag, and said that it would soon bring him many friends, so that he would grow up to be a wonderful image of a dungeon for them. The lizard noticed and said that the deaths had come. At that moment, some nasty bugs began to climb to them. Ghoul said that the boy hadn't brought any lumps of coke with him, and whether he would be able to restore the protein he had spent. But the coach assured me that everything would be fine, because he was blessed by nature. He was surprised that he was just born strong, but it wasn't so. He had the most dulled taste buds in the world. If so, he doesn't have a good taste, so he's not picky about food. The only thing he couldn't eat was his parents, because a bug was eating him at the time. The human lizard didn't understand how anyone could eat them, because it was horrible. But the guy was happy to see useful elements spreading through his body. After that, he tried to escape, but the lizard shouted that he could not do it. But in the moment, he was able to do it and started to go down. After that, he started looking at them and thinking who he would eat next. The ghouls began to ask the old lord if there was anything good in creating a dungeon. He explained that the dungeons were an automatic system that allowed you to accumulate power. Once it is created, the area from which energy can be sucked in expands, as well as its speed, so the one who created it can get a territory. But they were curious why people don't create dungeons. Lev said that he was only saying that because he didn't know how much energy it would take to create a dungeon. Because people are already suffering from taxes. And if they need more vitality with it, they can rise up. And not only can it not be created by a small number of people, but it is not easy to keep it, which makes my head hurt. It was humid and there was a bad smell. So neither people nor monsters lived there. And I wondered why it was necessary to create a dungeon in this particular place. The dog was on the girl's head, and turned around and said that the answer was obvious. Because there are two things that you can get from an environment where, at first glance, it is difficult to get energy. First, find a small area on purpose to simulate an intrusion by outsiders. And secondly, there may be another goal besides creating a dungeon. But in any case, creating a dungeon is quite difficult, and I didn't understand how they wanted to create it. The frog was drinking, and everyone was shouting to drink to the bottom and that the alcohol was pouring out. After he drank, he asked if they knew why alcohol was so good. He was asked if it was because he could find a lot of friends with it. And he confirmed their words because they had alcohol with them, and they can meet such diverse friends thanks to this drink. Then Carl asked if he was ready to put a seal on the contract. After they got him drunk, they turned to the others, because they had to create new alcohol, and invited them to the factory. Some man started shouting for more alcohol, because he was going to blow everything up. The frog hit him and he fell down, then explained that he broke. And to make it convenient for everyone to work, I wanted to go get the best ingredient for whiskey. One of the workers showed us how to do everything correctly, using his full weight. A frog approached Harden and held him by the shoulder, asking who he was. They thought they were friends, and were almost sure of it by the way they looked. The guy said that the break was over and they were going for another lap. He yelled at them to keep the rhythm and feel the contractions in their chests, and continued to command them. The next thing was to relax the biceps as if they were training with dumbbells, and the shovel was an extension of their forearms. They did not understand why they had to listen to him at all, and continued to do the exercises. He picked up a shovel and explained that sports equipment should not be treated lightly. Smiling, he told them to start from the beginning again because they had abandoned the equipment. They realized that they had made a mistake in thinking he was a friend because they thought he was drunk. Harden was shocked because they seemed to have become training buddies. They began to attack him, saying that they did not know about any training, and that he was not their friend at all. When they tried to attack him, it didn't work, and the coach added that you can't point sports equipment at people. Their shovel broke, so they assumed it was because they had been digging a lot, because such a rich man could not withstand their strong blows. He got very angry and asked if he really didn't listen to what they said. He began to take steps with his big feet and said that indeed, you need a lot of weight to pump up your muscles. But stretching with a resistance band is also an urgent matter, even though moderate stretching reduces muscle strength by pressing it down with your foot. But you can use it to lengthen your trained muscles. But then they have to continue to train in the right position. That was really important. if they didn't want to be left dead and stretch the tape. He laughed strangely and said that you need to stretch your carcasses. They began to apologize to him and say that he was definitely not a walker. Carl was glad, because they were enough to create a dungeon without the help of the Oculus. He said that it was important to raise a toast to this today, and ordered the drunkards to gather. The order of red-headed drunkards came to him, and they all stood very respectfully. One of them said that this meant that everything was ready to be lit, and Kilat made a remark to Kavod that this was not gentlemanly. He laughed and said that they should always stay together. Besides, we hadn't gathered for a long time to have fun, so we made an alcoholic game. A drink test was conducted and all the wealth was taken away. The Negro dice appeared, which was a four-sided dice that played this game, and announced the alcohol game and identified the players of each camp. He found the answer to 380 creatures, and depending on their character, they will be divided into 2 camps. Each camp should have 5 participants, with all the rest being ballast. He asked who wanted to play, because if no one did, then everyone would be punished with a blood alcohol concentration of 0%. Harden didn't know what it was, so he asked the ancestors of the rocking chair. It told him that alcohol does not directly harm muscles, but because the liver processes protein, it will do so later, first of all, alcohol. And because alcohol breaks down using moisture, there will be less of it in the muscles, and this will reduce the ability to exercise and the effectiveness of the workout. One ghoul asked whether it was necessary to press there. Leo stopped me and said that it could be an enemy trap and its magic, and there were others present besides them. So it was best not to expose ourselves to danger, but to observe the development of the situation with others. He wanted to do it anyway, but the Count forbade him to do so. The old lord thought about it and decided to grant it, because Harden might have thought he was just having fun. The dog said that this kind of magic does not have an immediate effect, but depending on the conditions, you can get a severe punishment. He asked if it would be more effective for the 5 strongest to participate. The first team was formed from Harden Old Lord, Leo, Rachel, and Robert. The other team consisted of 5 creatures of the Order of the Drunkards. The rules of the game Bonnie were that the players became rabbits, but one from each camp was not a rabbit, but a carrot. Participants in each camp must defend their carrots and fight the enemy. And what if the one who is captured becomes the loser, and his blood alcohol content drops to 0%, and the game is over, because it is more profitable to catch 1 carrot than 3 rabbits. He added that the ballast can also participate and wished them fun and interesting. He was wondering who the carrots were, but a frog came running and said there was a player who needed support. He didn't understand, because they had already sent 10 people in that direction, and he thought it was carrots. But the frog did not know and said that the boy was too strong. He was aggressive and said that he would never let his muscles be destroyed. The old lord shouted to everyone to protect him because he was the carrot of their team. Leo was surprised and asked why no one was running after him. They stopped and Gul asked if he could hear Morse code sounds. He explained that the old lord was most likely carving carrots while deciphering this alphabet. And then the Count realized why they followed him, to catch him if he was a carrot. But I wondered how the enemy knew it wasn't him if no one knew except the person who played the role. He translated the words and explained that the old lord was running and shouting about it to everyone in a panic. The man was very frightened and did not understand his actions, because there was no point in running and shouting about it. He asked them to stop because they looked scary. They saw that they had thin legs and could be broken with a single blow. The guy ducked because he smelled the slowness, and they wanted to put a footstep to break him. Then they threw a dumbbell, and the old lord weighed it down, but he easily dodged it. Rachel was surprised and asked him if he had a sword. He could be seen in the sky, and said that he possessed a luxuriously scented magic sword. The frogs began to run away when they saw Kavod on fire, because their legs could have been fried. His magic was the creation of fiery armor, depending on the alcohol fixings. He was about to light it and bent down to the guy, saying that he would burn to death. The guy didn't want to stand for it, so he threw up his hands and slammed it shut, and when he opened it again, the creature fell. And now Kavod from the opposing team could no longer play. Harden went further, but unfortunately he was only a rabbit, and I wondered who the carrot was in Team B. She did not understand whether she really had to do such nonsense. He explained that these were the terms of the contract, and therefore she was obliged to do so. But she only wanted to drink, and Kavod promised to take care of everything, so she wouldn't have to interfere. And he asked if she liked the toy he brought, and it was not bad, but she was bored in that room. But then I changed my mind and took it with me to go carrot hunting. Rachel was struggling with the guy and he just felt the power, so she told him not to be distracted when he was fighting her. But he said it wasn't her. It was Mr. Clark who came because there were carrots. He was angry that they were running away when he spoke, but the girl was already flying at him and believed that she could handle him on her own. Rachel closed her ears and spun on the sound wave, obeying the vibration, and how, if the core was fixed properly, it could reduce losses. Kavod asked her if she liked rabbit hunting, but she thought they were weaklings, so she would soon get bored of it. He said they were not joking and showed her what they did to Harden, who was lying on the ground. But she did not believe it. She was shocked and asked how she could fall asleep like that. Because he promised revenge, and he started telling her to beware. He said that he was defeated while sleeping, and that's why he needs to sleep 7 to 8 hours to grow muscles well. But alcohol interferes with muscle growth, and Rachel left him to sleep alone, because they didn't know who the carrot was anyway. Because whoever she caught had a 50-50 chance of being a carrot. She was angry because she was hoping for some kind of drama, but all she saw was arrogance. Kavod was very angry with the girl because she was spoiling his mistress's mood, and added that his magic was faster when he was drinking. He apologized and explained that he missed the target when he drank too much, and noticed that there was a big difference in ability between the opponents she was fighting. But when there were too many of them, Goody Builder thought he had hit him but was not hurt. And then the goat hit him with its horns and threw him up. His ability was to create an illusion, and the more he drank, the more his actions increased, and the real him was hiding among them. And even if she had told them everything, she was sure that they would not be able to cope, and she even wondered how long she would be able to survive their joint attack. The dog jumped up and started to bite the girl, and a goat started to run towards her. But Rachel got in the way and took him out of the game, and unfortunately he was a rabbit. They received a message that the old lord could no longer play, and when they killed him, it turned out that he was a rabbit, which surprised them greatly. And then Talcott came flying out after him, and Robert dealt with her, and she was the carrot they were looking for. Kubik said that as a punishment, the alcohol level of that team would go up. Leo was breathing heavily, he was their carrot, and added that the old lord was very good at taking his eyes off something, but that team was not crushed by the loss, so all the energy they used during the fight will become the basis for the dungeon. Sam was training, and the coach asked him what he was worried about, and if he wanted to pump up his muscles here. But in reality, he was insecure and thought he was weak, even though he looked good. And when he taught him how to lift the barbell, the guy could only compete in strength, because he was weak in technique. Harden realized that he wanted to compete with him, even though he hadn't been practicing for that long, and Sam apologized to him. Harden, something was disturbing from the very beginning, so he asked me to raise my hand and asked if there was any discomfort or pain. And he felt it because he did not use his dentate muscles, so others took over. Because when you lift your shoulders, you use the anterior dentate muscles to twist the bone and the trapezius, but now he does not use them when lifting his arm. And he will teach you how to train them. First, you need to stretch your arms forward a little wider than your shoulders. The second is to strain your arms to feel the tension of the band and start moving your shoulder blades and wait 3 to 5 seconds to arch your back, pulling your shoulders back. He had to do it 3 times, 15 times a day, and then he would feel the effect. The creature knew that it had to take care of it, because if it drank alcohol, it would become stronger, tougher, and harder. After those trainings, he felt the result, because he had a stronger throw. And the second was the improved condition of his body, and he did a posture stretching his muzzle, after which the lizard found the core of the dungeon. He wanted to change everything by changing the owner to himself. But the man snatched it away very quickly, and was happy with it, that it was so easy. The Goody Builders lined up and stood in a defensive stance, and said that the formation should not be broken while frogs were running at them. There was a hard battle. Leo defended Harden so that no one dared to touch him, and the others also tried to survive the battle. He was even surprised that such a big noise didn't wake him up. But we noticed that after the song, he was coming out of the smoke, and it was stressful for everyone. He laughed because he said he had just finished training some of the muscles in his vocal cords. When Carl saw him, he asked what kind of naked monkey he was. He came out and hit the frog with ease. It was a medical ball over his head. His students noticed that the coach's muscles were in a strange condition, but they thought they would not get caught this time. He didn't understand what was so strange about them because they looked great. Then he received a message that the muscles with interrupted muscle synthesis delay signals from the cerebellum. The anterior vastus muscles were out of control of the brain, and therefore the general condition was impaired. After that, all the muscles began to get out of control of the brain and became very large. After that, the muscle monster mode was activated, and he was even bigger than before, and everyone was shocked. The frog felt that he had been through this before, when he was a tadpole and was face to face with the exceptional and overwhelming power of the monster and the feeling of powerlessness. He wanted to run away, but the old lord said he couldn't and added that they all felt it. If they can't stop it here, then everything will be ruined. So the frog gathered his entire army, but they united only this time and ordered the first and second ranks to capture the coach in a circle. The frog started to climb up Harden's body. They had to close his eyes and had to calm the guy down again. When he was still very young, he trained a lot and lifted 900 kilograms of weights. And when he saw that his coach only lifted 100, he said that he was very weak. His mentor explained that they only made it look like he was doing bench press. But then he used only the small pectoral muscles, and any part of the body can be controlled freely, as if it were trained. I suggested that he try it too, so he could discover a new world, but he didn't want to, because he was practicing for fun. He began to disperse them, and everyone shouted to block his view, because he needed to be reassured that if they did, he would not be able to make maximum movements. But it started to move, and as a result, everyone started to fall down. It was very similar to a fight between an elephant and ants, a big throwing of undeniable power. The frog started drinking and said that he could manage one side of his leg, and asked if he could manage the other. But the old lord was not ready to become a suicide bomber. At that time, a giant hand was approaching Carl, but he was stopped by a boy. The old lord was satisfied that the minimum conditions had been met. Now we have to hold on until the coach is brought to consciousness. The guy was kind of disappointed because his phone broke again and he couldn't control his power. The coach said that whatever he does, the force he can control can lead him in the right direction. Pointing to the dumbbells, he asked how, about the force he could not control, and squeezed the dumbbell. A small piece of dumbbell shrapnel injured his finger, and he said that it could be a deadly weapon of his village. At the time, he thought he would like it when he got bigger, and that he would be happy when he strengthened his body. He wanted to be happy that he would increase his muscle endurance, but I couldn't understand why they looked like that, and that not a single muscle was listening to him now, even though everyone was trying to climb up to him. It was as if he realized that he was a bad student, because all this time he hadn't been treating his muscles the way he should have. Goody Builder started crying a lot after listening to Morse code. He started hugging him and asking him if he remembered their training and how much fun they had together. When the deltoid was first used, the muscles were visible to perform the exercise of spreading the arms to the sides. And then he supported him and helped him by asking him if he remembered that. A big pectoral muscle on the day he first wanted to become a bodybuilder, and sobbed like a child when he told him about it. The student remembered everything he ate very well and said that he was a role model for him. Then he told me that last time he wanted to surprise him when he was pumping his armpits. And even then, he deliberately made his face look surprised, which he was happy about. He really wanted his back muscles to be as broad and strong as his, and many of his students began to hug him all over the body and cry. Sam noticed that his muscles began to shake and shouted that they were responding to it. He added that they had to get a massage because they couldn't miss this chance. At that time, Robert began to summon the sand golem. He ordered me to grab Harden, but not to pinch him too much in all the right places. The girl also bent down on it, because she wanted to cover the places where the golems would not reach. The old lord turned to the boy and asked if there was any herb that could help put a person to sleep. He shouted that there was an aromatic plant growing there and ran after it. At that time, the frogs began to sing a lullaby to his muscles while holding his thumb on his foot. They were very excited about this painting and thought they had failed. But Sam saw that it didn't sound like an attack, and it was the sound of a mother whale worrying about her child. And he thought it was a maternal instinct. The muscle monster kept screaming as he completed 20 sets of 15 repetitions. The screaming was very loud, but there was also a sense of warmth and care, and when the noise stopped, everyone fell asleep. Then the boy began to take his usual form and rested on the ground. He had not felt such a pleasant muscle synthesis for a long time, and around him lay his students and the frogs, who had also fallen asleep. The next day, the guy asked about fighting again, but the frog told him not to talk to him. The whole army was practicing lunges holding a log over their heads with a trainer and his goody builders, and Carl thought he couldn't take it anymore. Ben watched and said that this one expected the student to do everything for the teacher. Ben thanked him, because by killing the Oculus, the risk factors were reduced, and the dungeon worked out. He asked her if she knew what pleased him the most. Pointing behind him, he explained that Elsa had been resurrected and was very happy. Amalia was very surprised, because she looked the same as before, but asked him if he thought it was really her. She started to cry and said that it didn't matter anymore, because they had to sort everything out, and Amalia explained that many people suffered because of his revenge. He was both scared and angry because he was left with nothing. His hand was enlarged in a couple of cases, and he asked her not to pretend that it was his fault, but she was only to blame for not stopping him on the day Elsa died. Ben corrected her, saying that they were to blame for allowing her to die. Then he swung his giant hand at his mentor. Then Elsa herself intervened and shouted for them to stop. So she stood in the middle of them, trying to stop their future actions. Elsa asked why they had to fight, because priests should be able to engage in dialogue. He was surprised when she told him that she had heard the teacher help him with everything, so why was he behaving so rudely? After that, she turned to her sister and told me that when she punishes students, she usually does it with a real sword, and asked if this is discipline, and if this is how they are educated. Amalia asked him why he was saying that, and he explained that she hadn't gotten her memories back. She laughed at this because she understood everything and took the girl by the throat. She said that it was just Elsa's shell, but in reality, it was a living dungeon. When it asked to be saved, the mentor explained that she did not have any personal lunch. But she thought about it, because if she left everything as it was, it would be a real disaster. Benjamin was scared and apologized to his teacher. He begged me to kill him and asked me not to kill Elsa by bowing to her. The boyfriend did not understand what she had done to make them want to kill her all the time. He admitted to everything, that it was his fault, that the entire garrison was destroyed, and that he was the one who attacked. After his confession, he lay down next to her and was ready to die, begging her for it. The mentor turned to him and apologized, waiting for him to understand that it was not Elsa. He started laughing, because that was exactly what he expected from her, and injected himself with the liquid, noting that nothing had changed. Carl started to say that he would never drink again, but the coach said he could do it. The frog smiled and said that he would do it once. He added that it is best to go in for sports instead of drinking. Harden said goodbye to them, and said they would see each other again. And he drank for an hour before Harden learned that he had a very long way to go. The old lord told him that they had arranged a meeting at Ali's mine as promised. Harden replied that he should devote time to physical activity and watch his diet. But he didn't have to worry about that. Then they all bowed and promised to try harder. The guy said he had fulfilled his promise and now he wanted me to fulfill mine. He praised them and said that they had done a very good job, but he didn't know what to do now because he didn't have the materials. This is his result. But the cat asked him to calm down and not to worry. So I asked him to find the materials and he would do it. Because he didn't know some things, he had very high standards. He could have missed him when he made a beam that would not bend even if you put 100 tons on it. The guy wondered if it was really that hard. But Leo said that there was no such technology, so he was here. Keith said that he knew it was possible and knew where such materials were located. This material was called Hickle, and it was found only in the newly emerging dungeons. And a new dungeon appeared not far away, but it was not difficult to find it. But it could be dangerous because no one knows what is there. They asked him if he really wanted to go there, but his answer was yes. And again he sent his Robert to go with him, and the latter was so surprised that he fell down in awe. Leo asked with all due respect to give him a modest moment to appreciate his work. But the guy was very worried and said they had to go there quickly. The count started shouting at him and said that he was not that strong, so he could die from a lot of attacks. This guy was very surprised and asked if he was a human and asked him to hold on. He brought them to a room and said that this armor was worn by the commander-in-chief during the war against the demons. It was light as a feather and impenetrable to the dragon's claws. They didn't understand why there was a pink dumbbell there, so Leo went over and picked it up. He said that it was very light, and Rachel decided to try it too, making sure of it. The guy asked me to move away and stood up as if he were lifting a deadlift. He recalled that I once asked my coach why he always ends his workouts with a pink dumbbell. He smiled at him and asked him what he thought about bodybuilding. Then Hardy mentioned 3 things: strength, size, and good skin. But the coach saw it differently. It was a workout that allowed you to lift any weight without any limits. They saw how hard it was for him and did not understand what was wrong with him. Bernard asked if he was the child Kevin was talking about, and he admitted that it was Kevin who was his colleague and spoke about the salvation of the whole world. Someday there will be a child who will have a hard time lifting this dumbbell, so I asked if he could hold it for me. But I didn't understand the point of looking for someone who would have a hard time lifting it. He explained that only those who can easily lift a car as heavy as a truck will be able to change this rotten world, and I was proud to know a guy who was capable of that. Bernard then asked if he had a student, and he admitted that as soon as he saw him, he had to pretend that he knew nothing about it. He said that, as usual, I did not understand what was going on in his head, and that this was a compliment. After that, he asked if he was going to return to his original world, but he denied it. He had to go somewhere else. Pointing upward, he wanted to go into space. The king started shouting that he needed to surpass his teacher and ordered him to pick it up. It was very difficult for him to lift this small dumbbell, and he was screaming in pain and heaviness. With a lot of effort, the guy managed to lift her up, and when he did, he let her back out. After that, Leo came over and easily lifted her up, because he wanted to understand what was going on. Harden stood up and asked if he knew where the teacher had gone, but unfortunately he only left him a pink dumbbell and disappeared. But he had the feeling that he was not missing, but was just training somewhere. Then he decided to ask if there were any other things his teacher used. Bernard started to think and he knew it, but it could be a little dangerous. But the guy didn't care about that. They came to a place that looked strange, and Leo asked if they needed it. He recalled the words of his teacher who said that the more you are in danger, the faster your body improves. So I decided to practice a little more and then move on. The other goodie builders were happy to have the old lord back, but he was shocked because he didn't understand what was there. One of them explained that a lot had happened during their absence. He began his story with the fact that when cocatrix disappeared and Harden left, the power struggle began again. For some time they managed to keep control, but when the orcs came, everything changed. Sam was worried and hoped that the person he was thinking of had not lost to the orcs, but he said that they still failed to defeat them. But only until the Orc Lord himself appeared. The old lord was shocked and asked what the name of the tribe he came from was. He began to recall the name and said that it was the Red Palm tribe, which alarmed the man very much. When he was still a baby, they said that this child was special because he had magic, so in the future he was to become a leader. When he was young, he used to launch stones with his strength. And when he was running away from the boar, he was approached by an orc who asked if he had magical powers. He introduced himself as an orc from the Red Palm tribe and added that they were the only ones with magical powers. He hugged him and offered to become good friends. After that, every time they met, he would constantly greet him like this, slapping him on the back. And it was with this gesture that he instilled fear in him all that time. He was disappointed with this, because even now he avoids it to the end. They began to signal that there had been an invasion, and the old lord ordered them to leave, because today was the time to get rid of the bad past. A large number of orcs were coming towards them, and they were hostile. Their lord ordered them to go forward and leave only the slaves and the Red Lodon tribe alive. The commander ordered everyone in the mine to be subdued and shouted this to his soldiers. Stones started falling on them, and they were shocked by this development. The old lord commanded all this, and was glad that now the enemies were confused, and that if they fought like crazy, they would surely win. The old lord hoped that he could handle it with a stone in his hand. The orcs tried to strike them with their swords, but did not understand why the smaller one did not go further. Then the older of the two said that he had found the main man, and that the fight would end when they could catch him. So he jumped up and said that Lord Ghoulies should die. He struck Sam hard and he started screaming, not understanding what was happening, and called him crazy. So I hit him back with a one-handed dumbbell press. The orc was a little surprised that the head turned out to be a pretty strong guy. Sam asked what he was talking about, which Lord Ghoulies, because he knew that the half-humans in the human record had united the Ghoulies. Then he started hitting him, explaining that he was a student of Harden, the master of the Ghoulies, and that he was not their leader. And he said that Herman would replace him, while the old lord came over, and when he heard this, he was very worried. The orc smiled and said they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and Sam added that he was leaving him to it. Pointing at him, he asked if he still remembered him. He jumped up, raising his hand in greeting, because he was very happy to see his friend. The guy offered to do 100 more pull-ups and then go down to the ground. It was hard enough for the count, so he said that it was too much, but the guy didn't understand it. He asked why Herman was the only one who didn't train, and why he was the only one who received special attention. The guy was a little surprised, and asked if he really thought that the old lord was not training. I asked him if he knew that the concept of training intensity was expanded on the example of his warm-up. For some people it would be a full-fledged workout, and that his workout routine, where he works out, will be very difficult for someone. The guy did not think that Herman himself knew about it, that his body was not the same as it was when they first met, because now his body wants to hide under such a shell extremely badly. The old lord was very angry at this attitude and said that he was no longer the weakling he once was, and grabbed him by the arm. Raising his hand, he said that he was Harden's right-hand man and the best wizard in Ghoul. After that, a piece of rock broke off and fell right on his head. Goody builders demonstrated their strong backs when orcs wanted to cut them with a sword. To establish peace in Ali's mine, the good builders needed an effective way to fight. The roosters were the strongest monsters there, and it was not efficient to use them as food, apparently. But by taming them, they will be able to fight together and thus increase their combat power. And in this way, the rooster rider was born to increase strength. So they started using them and ordered the horsemen to go forward, shouting that this was nonsense. They lifted them with a cock chest press. After that, they hit their enemies with cokes, and after seeing the result, Sam praised them. The old lord ordered the goody builders to push the enemy along with the riders. It was a new tactic, like beating off meat, which worked very well. One of the riders was happy and lowered his coke and asked if they had finished. A man came after them and wanted to make a hell of a bang. Seeing this, Herman began to use his gravity magic to save his friends and subjects. He made it look like it was placed in a pipe, and the burning aura went up. He then asked the others not to talk about this skill to Harden in anticipation of how he might use it. It was hard for him to get up, but I asked him if he thought the victory over the Red London tribe was the end. So the old lord asked him what he wanted to say to him. The students began to say that Herman needed to improve his body, and that by putting a healthy mind in a healthy body, everything would be fine. The orc explained that he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to quarrel with them anymore. After that, he asked if Herman knew an oculus, because one day they came to their tribe and gave them strength, and then told them that every month they had to pay 20% of their life energy. And when he wanted to refuse, he couldn't because they were holding the whole tribe hostage. After that, he did everything they wanted, but then started watching them to take revenge. Someone threw a water bomb at him, which went through him and he started coughing up blood. Sam pointed upstairs and said someone was up there. He started shouting that it was very hot and that he was saying not to use it. The girl explained that it was dangerous to talk so much and something was dripping from her hat. Because if you talk so much, you can end up like that orc, so it's better to keep quiet. While she was doing something, he asked her how she came up with the idea to kill everyone. So he stood on the edge of the peak and announced a special offer that he would let the person who told him where Harden was live. It made him a little angry because it seemed like they had a strong spirit. Rachel began to say that there were people among the Occupy movement who needed to be very careful. Leo began to panic and say that he was going to fall, and the girl was holding on to his legs below, and he let go of his hands, unable to bear the weight. They started to fall, and he realized how he was going to die. But the girl didn't lose her cool and used her point flexibility. He interrupted them all and sat on the old lord laughing that he would go easy. Samuel started running because he had to tell Harden not to come back. Bernard said that even though they hadn't been together for long, he couldn't send him away empty-handed. Leo began to say that although he was grateful to them, there were wonderful items such as legendary armor, swords, and shields. And I could not understand why they took that piece of scrap metal from all this. The Count was anxious and asked him why he had taken everything with him, how they would return. The guy was also a little surprised and asked if he knew what football was. This surprised him because he could not imagine what someone like him, who was obsessed with muscles, knew about football. Harden started asking him questions about whether he liked it or would like to succeed in it. After that, he realized that it would be easier for him to understand, because they say that if you want to play soccer, it is important to always keep the ball with you. This was due to a better understanding of its shape, weight, and texture, and all this knowledge is gradually accumulated. And since he wanted to play it, he suggested that we try hard today to become stronger tomorrow. Leo didn't understand what the football was about, and the boy explained that there were also round objects, so in a way, it was also football. Then he immediately turned around and asked if they wanted to play soccer well, but Rachel and Robert refused, and they decided to go on the road, even though the player thought he was mocking him. Amalia easily dealt with the enemy who attacked her. They told them to retreat, because they would buy them some time, and all the mercenaries had to do that. Ben was pleased because it was good, as he was overwhelmed with energy. Then he asked the teacher if she was not happy that their students were happy. The guy laughed at her, assuming that she was not able to answer him. Amalia looked strange, and he wondered what he should call it, a teacher or just a shell. The Count turned to the boy and told him to look ahead, because there were some guys running. The soldiers began to fall to their knees and ask them to help avenge them, and introduce themselves as mercenaries. Leo started shouting at them, or they had already told him what had happened to them. Then one stood up and introduced himself as Theodore, the leader of the mercenary title. They had a lot of friends who had lost loved ones to zombies, so they wandered around looking for someone who could help them take revenge. But I came across the one who started this whole mess. Harden asked who it was, and they said it was a red-haired girl, and they were very sorry, but the person who helped him was none other than General Leon. The girl was shocked to hear the information and thought she was talking about her aunt. He thought that there was a misunderstanding, because the general would never betray his country, and the guy stood there listening to all this and did not understand what was going on. The Count looked at him and I realized that if he didn't explain everything, it would only get worse. He reminded him of a man by name who had changed his body and that he had teamed up with the general. So it turns out that the person who brought him here was helping to commit the crime. It looked suspicious, and I was surprised that this was the purpose of the buildup. The girl said that was a lie because with his level of skill he could not even reach his aunt with his finger. Samuel finally found Harden and started calling out to him. He was very surprised by this guy and did not understand why he was here. He started shouting that there were big problems in the settlement and he was just from there. The man held out his hand to Herman and said that he would feel better if he told him everything. But he explained that no matter how many times he asked, no one would say anything about it. One of the students said that such pain was just a trifle for them. Sitting around the tree, they compared it to what they had endured during training. They provoked him even more by not believing that he would succeed. They started grabbing my hands and telling me to hold on, because they could do it. But in fact, they could no longer do it because their whole body was in pain. His scream frightened the enemy, because he did not realize what had happened, because he had not yet done anything. At that time, they suffered from indescribable pain that they had never experienced before. What they were experiencing now was the most severe pain due to the inability to play sports and the loss of muscle mass. When the guy said that there were big problems in the settlement, I should not immediately ask what happened. The old lord turned to Sam and told him that he had to make the right decision. He realized and was worried about it, that there was only a 90% chance that they would lose. At the time, he could not believe that even a horde of orcs had lost so easily. Sam asked him if they felt anything after their takedown, and he replied that it was only that he had easily beaten her, and the other didn't even participate because he was afraid to even think about being on the same level as Harden. And when the guy wanted to bring him, Herman said that he would never do it and hadn't even thought about it. He didn't even argue that the guy was strong, but he wondered what would happen, that they would beat him. Their target was him, and they are not even interested in goodie builders, so it is more likely that they will not beat them. The old lord said to bring him to the moment when he could defeat them. But until that happens, you can't bring him here in any case. So he said that instead, he would stay there and fight, and maybe they would be able to find him help, because he had a much better chance of winning. One of his friends apologized and said that he wouldn't be able to do it because they didn't have much time to talk, because it was the job of the elders to protect the younger ones. When he remembered all this, he said it was no big deal, because he thought it would be useful to practice with Harden a little more. He was glad that everything was fine, because he thought he would have to do everything alone again. Theodore started shouting that the whole group was gathered to find help. They took the load on their shoulders, because if they couldn't get through, they would go through and carry it. It was hard for Theodore. He shouted that if it didn't work out, all the mercenaries would be destroyed. Rachel asked if they meant to say that finding the entrance to the dungeon was the point of their strategy. Leo confirmed everything, because even though it's a dungeon, not all places are dungeons. Because every dungeon guard tries to fight where he has more advantages. They ran fast, and it was fortunate that they did not have to conquer the dungeons, because all they need to do is find the black bone stone he told them about. While they were running, Theodore asked what would happen to their revenge. The boy explained that he would have to read to her so that she would no longer disturb them. He asked what would happen if the general really betrayed them. The girl was convinced that her aunt would never follow that guy to unite. Robert reported that the signal from the second golem in the southwest was interrupted. They had little information and had to go there and see what happened. The signal from the third golem also disappeared, but it was in the northwestern direction. Leo said she wasn't strong enough for this dungeon. Rover started to get angry, because his golems were of a high level. Not easy to defeat, but they were destroyed before they could pass anything on. While they were running, it was all very strange because I did not see any enemy. The dog said he would learn everything quickly and began to change his position. When he got there, he was shocked by how big the enemy was. While they were waiting for me, the guy offered to do some arm exercises for them. Leo started shouting that it was definitely not worth training on enemy territory, because it only exhausted them. Sam was happy and said that even if their arms got tired, they could always move their lower body. This exercise strengthens the three main muscles of the arms. The usual weight to be carried with both arms is called overhead extension. First, I had to take something heavy with both hands and lift it above my head. Second, bend your elbows and gently lower the weight behind your head. Thirdly, using the strength of the triceps, lift it above you again. And I had to be careful not to let my elbows go to the sides. The girl ran through the forest and began to assume that her aunt was really involved. But even so, she can't let some guy tarnish her reputation. So she promised to find the imposter. Theodore felt some kind of vibration, but I don't know if it was his imagination or not. He also said that he could feel vibrations in his muscles, and that something was happening somewhere near them. Sam was happy and said that this warm-up would be enough. He said it would be dangerous for them to stay here and train, and they would leave. The girl leaned over to a flower and wondered what it was. Ben came up behind her and said it was a flower, and she started asking other strange questions. Elsa asked what each thing in the forest was called, whether it was a leaf or a bug. After that, Ben asked if she didn't remember anything from the past at all, and that's all she could say to him standing in front of him. He was surprised when she told him why he was so concerned about her and protected her. The guy explained that more and more people would attack them in the future, because in case something happened to him, he asked her not to leave her safe place. A guy came to your husband and you said that it's not cool to be in that position, but fortunately their head is interested in his research. It was a great honor for him that they were able to host him. So I asked him if his object of study was a living dungeon. The red-haired man went to him and said that it was like a walking battery, but it was a little bit wrong. At first, he wanted to ask what happened, but it was not important to him, so he whispered that they needed it when it was finished. He started laughing so hard that his eyes lit up, and I asked him if there would be any more problems. After that, Elsa asked him if he was worried about something, because she could see that something was wrong. Benjamin regained consciousness and said that it was nothing important, smiling. In fact, he was afraid of losing his beloved again. Elsa noticed that he looked upset and thought it was because of her, but he said it wasn't. She said that she would always be there for him the way he wanted. Ben was shocked when he heard Harden and Sam's voices behind him, who realized the source of those feelings. The guy remembered that it was him last time and asked if he wanted to cause them trouble again. And when he tried to hit him, the coach grabbed his arm, seeing that he wanted to demonstrate his strength again. But Sam shook his head. He didn't think it was. Then he started shouting at him, asking if he felt it with his heart muscle without even realizing it. They started fighting again, but it quickly ended when the guy used an extra press and pinned him to the ground. He wanted to know one thing he needed and hovered over it. The girl started screaming for them to stop in her hands. Something was glowing. Then Ben started yelling at her not to do it. Afterward, the student said that it looked much more dangerous than the master's sword. Elsa explained that she wasn't doing it just to scare people, because she was actually very strong. But Benjamin wanted to explain that he didn't need to do that because he didn't want to fight anymore. She denied it because she wanted to protect him as he protected her. Because the girl doesn't know anything about how things used to be, but now they were fine. The man wondered what would happen when all the energy was exhausted. But it was all a hypothesis, and I assumed that she would eventually die. Roby saw that the situation was poorly defended against a dog attack with his seal. Although he was scared, he knew he had to buy time, so he built the stone wall. He thought about it because he couldn't summon a new lemma at the moment. The dog began to defend itself against it and run away, but the beast was heading from above, and there was still a tornado. After that, he found himself underwater and thought he had nothing to fear, but the dog started digging and quickly running after him underground. Robert was panicking and wanted to be rescued. Rachel also faced someone in a battle defending herself from an attack. The girl asked her aunt to regain consciousness, asking what he had done to her. She recalled how she had once been told that she could not play with it now because she was busy. Then she offered to play with it herself, and she will train it some more. She was attentive and slowly explained everything, pointing to the sword hilt. She said that with this cross-handled weapon you can protect yourself from an enemy attack. She added that it can be difficult as she will notice that they are stronger than her. And the little girl was surprised when she was asked what she would do in such a situation. I had to use my flexible body to deflect blows using the enemy's strength, and quickly beat him. But the problem was that her aunt's speed was much higher than hers. Rachel thought that even if there were a large number of them, and with a sword, you could always find a weakness. And she started spinning around the sword that was flying at her. They clashed in an attack, but the girl did not know if she would be able to reach her aunt. Since she was still inexperienced in this, she had a little difficulty in this battle. She looked at her and realized that she still needed a mentor, when she made a small wooden sword especially for her and gave it to her. Amalia said that her sword had always been with her all her life, and that she had kept it safe.